local government, parliamentary, and presidential elections. We also compiled those registers, and the process was concluded. We are also mandated by the law to display all these registers in all the parishes across the country. The process of display was also concluded, and those who were ineligible were identified and duly removed from the register. That process was also undertaken conventionally and traditionally across the country and concluded. By the time COVID set in, we were in the process of launching the first round of elections, that is for the special interest groups across the country. That's when the lockdown came in, and all activities were frozen in that regard. So by the time government declared the national lockdown, the Commission was already implementing the preliminary activities under the roadmap for the general elections. The Commission had to postpone the above activities under the roadmap in response to measures introduced by government to prevent the spread of the virus. This is because electoral activities, by their nature, involve public gatherings, excitement, a carnival-like atmosphere, and hence pose high COVID-19 risk of person-to-person and object-to-person transmissions. The discussions in the public domain have been on whether or not to have elections, or whether we can have credible, free, and fair elections in a COVID environment. In this regard, the Commission wishes to recognize the constitutional right of Ugandans to vote and choose leaders of their choice, as well as our duty as a Commission to facilitate the exercise of those rights. The Commission is further mindful of the need to ensure a healthy and safe environment for all stakeholders during the electoral process. In other countries, as I think the moderator was saying, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, some countries have taken different measures. Some which had scheduled elections 2020 considered various measures that range from continuing with the elections while putting in place safety protocols such as social distancing, and where possible avoid large public gatherings. Like in Benin, they do not allow large public gatherings or rallies. Campaigns were largely conducted on media or by the use of media platforms, and the use of sanitizers and so on and so forth. Burundi also held elections in May 2020, but in their case, it was no holds barred, and there were large gatherings, although I understand sanitizers were encouraged. Tanzania is expected to go to the polls as well, and has been implementing a variation of measures. Malawi also held presidential elections. They do not have much on how I think they also applied the SOPs, but I could see from, I think, some footages where you had large gatherings of rallies and so on and so forth. But what is important, shortly after those elections, I think the new president sounded an alarm that there was a spike in infections following the elections. With over about 500,000 confirmed COVID-19 cases on the continent, and about 11,500 deaths as of 6 July, and we are still counting. Countries that were set to organize polls in the second half of this year have had to decide whether to go ahead or postpone to a later date. Countries like Ethiopia understand postpone their elections. According to the United Nations and other election experts, providing sanitation facilities at polling stations and maintaining social distancing and requiring or supplying personal protective gear are some of the many efforts that could help make voting as safe as possible. Here in Uganda, we have elections scheduled for this year and next year. As I mentioned, starting with the elections for the special interest groups from village to national level. These were scheduled to commence in April 2020, but was postponed, as I mentioned, due to COVID-19. As a result, the Commission has had to adjust or readjust those activities starting with this month of July. If it was not for COVID, according to the roadmap, by now the elections for the special interest groups would have been over, they would have been concluded at village, parish, and sub-county level. Would now be in this month of July, we're now going for nominations at district level. And these special interest groups also have to participate at the district level processes, and therefore they should have been in a place by now to join the other candidates for the local government slots. But that has also been adjusted as a result of COVID-19. What is important, and I wish to emphasize, is that the revised roadmap is not a new thing altogether. It's not new at all. It's just a readjustment of the timelines for the remaining activities. The activities that we had successfully undertaken and concluded before COVID, before the lockdown, are not part of the revised roadmap. The revised roadmap solely concerns those activities which were not yet concluded at the time the lockdown was imposed. As already stated, the revised roadmap has generated discussions on the modalities of its implementation in light of the COVID-19 context. And most importantly, the Commission, after consultations with the experts from Ministry of Health, felt or decided that in order to avoid the spread of the virus, the crowd gathering and pooling process or activity of mass rallies should not take place. Incidentally, in our discussions with the Ministry of Health, we looked at three options. We considered three options. One, a fully fledged scientific election, where you have online nominations, where you have virtual campaigns, where you have online or electronic or scientific voting, where you have scientific or electronic counting of results, tallying of results, and so on. We also looked at a mixture, what they call the hybrid. You have the conventional, and then you also have the traditional. When we looked at the option of a fully fledged scientific election, we found that was untenable. Why? One, the legal regime or framework. The current legal regime of framework largely provides for conventional methods of doing things. Talks of a voters register, talks of voter identification, the polling station, and so on and so forth, and so many other things. Even the infrastructure, look at the infrastructure. How long and how much will it take us to set up the infrastructure across the country? Understand the internet coverage does not extend to the entire country. That's what I'm told. Look at some of these very remote areas. Then online counting of votes, the infrastructure. How would you do that? And so on and so forth. Then the traditional conventional way of conducting elections as we know them, as we've been doing them, have the usual fanfare in our campaign rallies, mass campaign rallies, processions, candidate being escorted by thousands of people, singing and dancing, traditional music and so on, music blaring from systems and so forth. That was said to be a disaster if we allowed that kind of situation to take place. Then we looked at the hybrid hybrid concept. You can have some kind of scientific process, but retain the traditional in some other areas. And we zeroed in on that one as the most plausible in the circumstances, where you have virtual campaigns or media-led campaigns, where you have the traditional way of nominations, with the candidates coming to the nomination centers, but with limited supporters accompanying him or her, and then putting in place the SOPs at the polling stations, at the nomination center. Then we looked at polling, voting. We said that one can also be done traditionally, conventionally, but you put in place the SOPs. We felt the polling station can be easily managed by observing these SOPs. Social distancing, making sure the people in the queue are not packed together, and you limit the numbers depending on the space at the polling station. You can put in place the sanitizers and ensure that everyone dons a mask. The counting of votes can also be undertaken traditionally, provided you avoid overcrowding and there is social distancing. Then the transmission, of course, the transmission, for example, for the presidential results, that is done electronically to the National Tally Center. So we opted and zeroed in on that, what you may call a hybrid process, as the most convenient and the most plausible in the circumstances. It would ensure, one, that you achieve your objective of ensuring the people, even with the SOPs in place, that they will not prevent a voter from making his or her choice as to the person he or she wants. Secondly, it will also allow us to safeguard the lives of the voters, of the polling officials, and whoever is present at this polling station. So we settled for the hybrid. So I would rather say, other than saying Byabakama's scientific election, call it Byabakama's hybrid election. The Commission appreciates the stakeholders who have reached out to us during our meetings to identify issues of concern for discussion and resolution. The views from the meetings are helping to broaden the possibilities before us for the conduct of safe outreach to the respective supporter bases and avoiding the spread of the virus during the campaign period. The enthusiastic involvement of stakeholders is a demonstration of mature leadership and also shows your deep concern and commitment to achieving credible electoral processes in Uganda. This responsible and commendable attitude is further demonstrated by the presence of many distinguished leaders from various organizations and institutions at this stakeholder meeting. Let me also emphasize, whereas we are battling or grappling with the COVID pandemic, whereas we have had to adjust in many ways our lifestyles as a result of that, whereas we have had to adjust some of the activities in the roadmap, in the context of timelines, there is one immovable, inadjustable, non-adjustable aspect of these elections, and that is Article 61, Clause 2, which is immovable, non-adjustable, non-compromising, for it sets the timeline within which the Electoral Commission must conduct these elections. It's immovable. Therefore, when the Commission launched a revised roadmap, we had to operate against the remaining period as against Article 61, or in the context of Article 61. That's why we had to call upon all the political parties and other stakeholders, that please, you have to recognize that it is not in the interest of the Commission to stifle in the context of the time available some of your activities. It is because of Article 61 that we are compelled, all of us, to utilize the available time. And we will call upon you, therefore, to adjust as well. Article 61, Clause 2. Is immovable. I wish to state that such participatory consultative processes will be helpful as we explore best ways of achieving credible processes while at the same time protecting the voter and the general public. I wish also to state that the Electoral Commission has carefully observed how other countries and their election management bodies have conducted the elections in an environment of COVID-19. This has helped inform our cautious approach to our electoral activities and operational guidelines. We therefore assert that the health and safety of citizens, the voters, candidates, election staff, security personnel, and other stakeholders should be the most important and primary consideration. And therefore this means the implementation of this electoral roadmap will have to feature substantially reduced physical human interactions. Our recommendations have been based on sound risk analysis of the requirements for the conduct of electoral activities against the health requirements in light of COVID-19 to ensure that citizens participate with minimal or no risk of exposure to the virus. I wish to salute the political parties and organizations that have activated their internal processes and embarked on identifying flag bearers for the various elective positions. We wish you success with the party primaries and also advise you to refer to the recently passed, has it been passed, Honorable Salirwa? Political parties and organizations regulations on conducting elections and meetings during the conditions of public health precautions. The Commission further urges you to critically assess the aspiring candidates and ensure they meet the requirements for nomination. Because of limited time, you will know, Honorable, your honorables, the leaders of political parties, that after nominations, the Commission is turned into a battleground of sorts by a host of complaints against the candidature of some people, either on grounds of inadequate academic qualifications, and so on and so forth. And therefore this eats a lot of time. I think in 2016, I'm told the Commission had about how many? 200 petitions, post-nomination petitions to the Commission. And the Commission is required by law to sit and resolve these complaints or petitions in a quasi-judicial manner. That eats time as well. Remember, printing of the ballot papers can only take place after nominations. And printing can also take place after all these disputes surrounding the candidature of X, Y, or Z have been resolved. So political parties, please require your flag bearers interrogate the eligibility of your flag bearers, particularly in the area of academic qualifications and also in the names. Because we have had that as a challenge where candidates' names or particulars in the register are at variance with the academic papers presented. So can you please sort out all these issues before you hand over your flag to somebody? Remember, the law permits us to disqualify or to denominate a nominated candidate on account of some of these grounds. Now, if we denominate, the law does not say we give you an opportunity to get a dangerous substitute. The law does not permit that. So if your candidate is denominated on account of flaws in his or her nomination processes, then the parties with who have the proper candidates will proceed, and your party will. So political parties, save us. because we won't have the time to look into these complaints. Finally, the Electoral Commission salutes the government and all the people of Uganda and our partners, who include UN agencies, for working together to contain the spread of the virus. I further convey our deep appreciation to the various agencies and task force teams at the national and district local levels under the leadership of the Minister of Health for their tireless efforts in guiding the nation in public health safety, which has helped prevent the loss of lives due to the pandemic. Last but not least, the Commission wishes to assure the stakeholders and the country at large of our unwavering commitment to conduct a credible, free and fair election despite the COVID pandemic. However, this can only be done when all the stakeholders join the Commission in this undertaking. I thank you. I wish you a good meeting and look forward to your active engagement and productive outcomes. Thank you for God and my country.
All right, thank you very much, Justice Byabakama, for the kind words. I hope they're kind enough. The politicians will be able to tell us. This is a hybrid election, like he did say. It's a mixture of scientific and the traditional way of voting. And he particularly talked about Article 61(2), which is immovable, non-changeable. It's everything. It's static, and it spells out the time through which Uganda is supposed to be holding the next elections. Without wasting any more time, we would like to invite the UNDP resident representative, Ms. Elsie Atafwa, and who right after will invite the UN resident coordinator, Her Excellency Rosa Malango.
Thank you very much, Mildred. Your Lordship Simon Byabakama, Chairperson of the Electoral Commission, Ms. Rosa Malango, UN Resident Coordinator, government officials, distinguished representatives of political parties, civil society organizations, professional associations, faith-based organizations, media houses, excellencies, ambassadors, development partners, representatives, UN representatives, distinguished panelists, and all stakeholders in Uganda's electoral process, all the people of Uganda following the event on TV, radio, and social media, good morning. On behalf of the United Nations Development Programme and our wider United Nations family, let me sincerely thank you, Your Lordship Simon Byabakama, the Chairperson of the Electoral Commission, and the Electoral Commission for the partnership that has enabled us to jointly host this important dialogue on the 2020-2021 general elections. I commend the Electoral Commission for bringing the various stakeholders on board and making provision for as many Ugandans as possible to follow this dialogue on air, via live television, via radio, online via Zoom, and social media platforms. I'm aware that several representatives of political parties, civil society organizations, professional bodies, media, the youth, and women are tuning and on standby to make their contributions. This conversation is critical to Uganda's journey towards elections date, as it is aimed at creating awareness on the novel concept of scientific elections, now called hybrid elections, and generating consensus on key milestones and building confidence in the electoral process and in the roadmap issued by the Electoral Commission. It is also critical as we believe that elections are the means through which people voice their preferences and choose their representatives. Elections are therefore a powerful tool that can convey legitimacy on the institutions or representatives that emerge from them. These ideals are critical elements of the United Nations mandate and UNDP's democratic governance work. Let me also express gratitude to development partners represented by the embassies of Norway, Sweden, Austria, and Denmark, and our United Nations family who have provided support through a project called Strengthening Electoral Processes in Uganda, SEPU for short, through which this dialogue is being supported. The support from this project will go a long way in enabling the Electoral Commission and all other stakeholders to collectively work to fostering transparent, inclusive, accountable, and peaceful general elections in 2020-2021. The support that the United Nations is providing through the Strengthening Electoral Processes in Uganda project is part of our global mandate to strengthen democracy and good governance, as well as support UN member states achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, in particular SDG 16, which focuses on peace, justice, and strong institutions. Good governance is essential for enabling economic, social, and political development. The 2030 Agenda that I've mentioned above explicitly recognizes that sustainable development is built on the foundation of a peaceful, just, and inclusive society with strong institutions. It also recognizes that peaceful and inclusive societies are both outcomes and enablers of sustainable development. This is all the more important now, given that elections are being held in this unprecedented time of COVID-19, and where we are experiencing the socioeconomic impacts of COVID-19, compounded with the fact that previous election cycles have posed macroeconomic instabilities that dampen economic activities and growth due to pre- and post-election expectations for formation and uncertainty among investors about the economy. Therefore, fostering good governance and indeed peaceful elections and the Third National Development Plan. Through the Strengthening Electoral Processes in Uganda project, the United Nations Development Programme, as a lead agency, is working with other UN agencies in the elections project, namely United Nations Women, and I'm glad my fellow rep is here as well, the Office of the United Nations High Commission for Human Rights, OHCHR, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, the United Nations Resident Coordinator's Office, under the leadership of the United Nations Resident Coordinator, Ms. Rosa Malango. The Election Support Project, of which we are working with the Electoral Commission, judiciary, civil society, faith-based organizations, political parties, security agencies, media, and others, therefore, seeks to promote transparency, inclusion, credibility, and sustenance of peace building during the electoral process. We are happy to partner with all stakeholders to achieve these objectives. In addition to this project, the United Nations family also have other projects that are complementing and contributing to electoral processes in Uganda. The Strengthening Electoral Processes in Uganda project is consistent with Uganda's Vision 2040, which underscores that the tenets of good governance include constitutional democracy, protection of human rights, rule of law, political and electoral processes, transparency and accountability, government effectiveness, and security. In rendering this support, the United Nations principle is to support and not to dictate to member states on how they manage their national affairs, including the conduct of elections. We remain apolitical. Our assistance aims to ensure that elections are fully nationally owned and that there is awareness of elections as a way of contributing to democratic governance framework, and that elections provide a vital means to safeguard human rights, exercise of choice, and expression of opinions. We encourage inclusive dialogue and broad-based consultations, which should include key stakeholders like political parties, the media, civil society, and marginalized groups such as women, the youth, and persons with disabilities. It is within this spirit that the United Nations family supported the Electoral Commission to host today's virtual stakeholders dialogue. We strongly believe this forum will provide a firm foundation and indeed building blocks towards consensus and confidence in the electoral process. While elections are naturally contentious political events, the overlay of the COVID-19 context and the proposal for a digital, scientific, or now hybrid campaigns to curb further spread of the coronavirus brings in another dimension. Let all views contend in this dialogue as Ugandans strive for consensus towards a common good. I again thank the Electoral Commission for taking this bold step to invite key electoral stakeholders to contribute to the way forward on how the 2020-2021 elections will be planned and conducted. It is our hope that this process will assist in fostering transparent, inclusive, accountable, and peaceful elections in 2020, 2021, and beyond. It is now my pleasure to invite the United Nations Resident Coordinator to make a statement on behalf of the United Nations system in Uganda. As she does so, I would like to appreciate her for leading the United Nations system in Uganda to galvanize support, to galvanize the support all the UN agencies are providing Uganda towards the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, including SDG 16 on peace, justice, and strong institutions, of which elections are a key part of the attainment of SDG 16. Additionally, the United Nations is supporting the country to respond to and recover from COVID effects. And given the elections are being held in this unprecedented time, it is important that the resident coordinator share some reflections from the UN system on this. Without much ado, I have the delight and pleasure to welcome you, Madam Resident Coordinator, to make your statement on behalf of the United Nations. Thank you.
I'm going to follow the Chairperson of the Electoral Commission with the social distance. My mask is made in Uganda. Let me start off with that. So congratulations to the youth who are making this, and thank you, IOM, for bringing them to my attention. Let me say, my brother, the Chairperson of the Electoral Commission, the Chairperson of the National Consultative Forum present, Chairperson of IPOD, it's been a while. To the leaders of the political parties, it's also been a while. Justice Ogola, thank you for always being there. To the members of civil society, to our development partners who I know are following us online, and Austria for always being physically steadfast present, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the United Nations system working on Uganda, which includes 35 United Nations agencies and over 3,200 staff strong, thank you for giving us the opportunity to be here. It is a pleasure for me to be here this morning for this dialogue on one of the most dynamic manifestations of we the people of the world, as reflected in the UN Charter, known as the elections. I want to thank the Electoral Commission for the partnership that we have enjoyed since my arrival in Uganda in 2016, as well as for your partnership with the United Nations as an organization over several decades. Our partnership with the Commission allowed a visit to Ghana last year, where we went to look at some of the lessons that we could learn from another Pan-African country that had similar issues and challenges to what Uganda is facing today. While there, we also looked into how Ghana had used the local and modern capacities for dialogue, civic education, and peace building in order to construct its own infrastructure for peace, which helped to create a culture of tolerance and collective problem solving as they went into their elections. Ladies and gentlemen, let me quote Albert Einstein, who said, "It is the duty of every citizen, according to his best capacities, to give validity to his convictions in political affairs." End quote. No other process in a democracy grants citizens the validity than electing their leaders. In the current complex global context in which the COVID-19 pandemic is making us live, I must applaud the government and people of Uganda for your commitment to prepare to deliver an inclusive electoral process in 2021. I must use this opportunity to also welcome the passage of the electoral reforms, which we have been following since 2016, and to commit our continued support as the United Nations to accompany Uganda and Ugandans in your journey to deepen your democracy. COVID-19 has brought unexpected challenges to the world. It affects both the most established democracies as well as developing nations. But this is not just a health crisis. It is also a major socioeconomic crisis. It provides each nation with the opportunity to reassess its approaches to safety and security, to humanitarian action, to sustainable development, as well as to governance and human rights. Countries in Africa have responded pretty well to the COVID-19 pandemic and should be applauded for doing so. Uganda's very decisive response right at the beginning of the pandemic, when countries in the region started to record cases within their borders, continues to be recognized by us. Imposing the mandatory quarantine for travelers and later rolling out a lockdown was necessary for the country to manage the spread of the coronavirus, cushion the healthcare system and avoid collapse, and refocus on indigenous capacities to detect, test, and treat affected persons. In the process of the COVID response, we have also seen the resurgence of a Ugandan manufacturing community that has come to life with a new purpose, and new skills, and new interests. We have seen more open debates about social protection, eliminating gender-based violence, including a campaign of men to support gender equality. We have heard more frequent discussions, sometimes with a bit of desperation, about the urgent needs to create jobs for everyone, everywhere. We have heard with a greater sense of urgency the need to make sure that all decisions on development, economic growth, and governance are inclusive for women, for youth, people with special needs, regardless of where they come from in this country. So I commend the government, the frontline workers, and people from all walks of life who have responded to the COVID-19 crisis so far. I want to thank every person, institution, and company who has contributed to the response in keeping people alive. To those of you who have shown acts of kindness to strangers and neighbors alike, muy bareño. At least I tried. I promise I'll do a chole next year. Ladies and gentlemen, as I stand here today, I did a quick review in the world. Since the COVID pandemic, about 30 elections and referendums have taken place around the world, several of them on the African continent. So it is in this context that Uganda is to be commended for preparing to hold elections despite this pandemic. Okay. But it also demonstrates that we've had building blocks, as small as they may be, in creating stability, in creating peace and development over the years. Uganda is also ready to take lessons from countries who have held elections, as well as from those who have decided to postpone the elections. And this is something that we really welcome as you go forward. I want to use this opportunity to encourage the Electoral Commission to continue to apply lessons and to share them regularly with all stakeholders as you continue to prepare towards 2021 elections. Due to this COVID pandemic, we understand that the Electoral Commission will have to work with everyone in this room today and others who are following online to ensure that citizens are safe, actually from two things. We need to keep citizens safe from violence, but we also need to keep citizens safe from COVID-19 concurrently. Ladies and gentlemen, we face a new normal. It will require constant engagement to figure out how do we roll out protective measures to figure out how do we preserve the key elements and rights related to your emerging democracy. The Sustainable Development Goals agenda calls on every single nation on earth to put people first, to protect the planet, to ensure inclusive prosperity, and to sustain peace for all. In this context, our partnership with the government and people of Uganda will continue. We will focus on building resilient institutions, supporting dialogue, civil society engagement, and help ensure that no one is left behind during this journey towards inclusive development and transformative governance. Today's dialogue is an opportunity to engage with each other respectfully and in a tolerant spirit to explore avenues and modalities for the revised electoral roadmap issued by Electoral Commission. I therefore invite you to please observe the spirit of Ubuntu as we discuss bottlenecks, challenges, and proposed solutions. As I conclude, I would like to highlight that although elections are just one brick in the house we call democracy, they can bear the unbelievable ability to the history of development of any country on earth. So Uganda, you have been in a commendable path since your turbulent days of civil strife to recovery to where you are today. It is time to sustain your peace and development gains, but it is also time to reflect on a new phase and a new path towards human-centric inclusive development. We have an opportunity with the National Development Plan 3 being launched, with the SDGs guiding us, and even the African Union Vision 2063 on aspirations for a solid Africa capable of solving its own problems, to be innovative, courageous, and transformative. Uganda should not allow the 2021 elections to disrupt its development path. I call upon us to embrace this opportunity that the elections during COVID present to us to think of a new social contract that reflects Uganda's potential, Uganda's values, and ensure that no one is left behind. Ladies and gentlemen, during the next 12 months, let's focus on a new nexus: health, elections, civic education, peace building, and sustainable development. I implore all present to give dialogue a chance as the country embarks on an unfamiliar territory for conducting an election. The United Nations system shall continue to accompany all of you in this quest for credible and inclusive elections. As Nelson Mandela once said, action without vision is only passing time. Vision without action is merely daydreaming. But vision with action can change the world. So I invite you to work together so we can change Uganda to become all that it can be. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency Rosa Malango, for giving us the comments, and I totally agree that as we go to the polls, we need to ensure that we're protected from violence, but also as well protected from COVID-19. I would like now to invite the Electoral Commission Director of Operations, Mr. Leonard Mulekwa, who will be speaking to us about the key changes in the electoral roadmap and why these changes had to come about. There are already questions about why the chairperson only quoted Article 61 particularly. Mr. Mulekwa, kindly, I would request that you step to the fore and give us. Welcome, Mr. Leonard Mulekwa, the EC Director of Operations.
The Chair, EC, the UNDP Resident Representative, the UN Resident Coordinator, and for my safety, all protocol observed. I would like to join in and welcome you to this meeting and express my happiness that we are here discussing issues of elections. And I think the more we talk about elections, the better we shall all get to understand. Many of the things I'm going to talk about have appeared, some in the remarks by the Chair. Anyhow, as the moderator said, we are going to look at why, because there are questions out there, people asking, why now? Why can't we wait and have these elections after COVID? And when you say after COVID, then the other question will be, when is that? Because nobody knows right now when the country will be clear of COVID-19. So since we are not aware, leave alone being aware as to when we shall have some safety in the form of vaccinations for COVID-19. So there are questions why, and we are going to attempt to answer some of these questions. And then, of course, it has been said here by the Chair, some people had dubbed it scientific, and I think as EC we have been very careful. Anywhere we have not used the word scientific because it's not a scientific election. So, therefore, what is new from the convention we have always known? So we are going to attempt to answer some of those questions. And in discussing elections, many times you can't avoid being legalistic because you are guided by the law. Most of the activities we do are guided by the law. So there is no way we can talk without referring to the law. And as my boss said earlier, the most critical and our guiding law is the Constitution. And in the Constitution, all articles are important. But for purposes of setting time frames for elections, Article 61, which the chairman has already talked about, tells us when the elections should be conducted. And this article says, the Electoral Commission shall hold presidential, general parliamentary, and local governments councils elections within the first 30 days of the last 122 days before the expiration of the term of office of the President, Parliament, or local government councils, as the case may be. Now, it has said that should be it. We cannot go outside of that. Now, when you compute from the known, because we all know that the term of office for the current elected leaders expires on 12th May 2021. And then this article is saying within the last 122 days, but the first 30 days of those, we should have all elections for president, for parliament, and for local governments conducted. And this particular is talking of polling should have been done. So we start as commission, and that's how we normally work. We start from that provision and set time frame for all the other activities. Because that has given us a destination. I'm sure when we came here today, all of us, our destination was here. So we had to plan our routes to here, knowing the destination, and we agreed that if you don't know where you are going, it's very difficult for you even to decide on the means of transport. So for us, we know, and I think the whole country knows, that the destination in terms of conducting polling is that period. And that period, dear stakeholders, falls between January 10th, 2020 and February 8th, 2020. So that article is directing that Uganda's general elections, for purposes of electing the president, the parliament, and local governments, has to be between January 10th and February 8th. All the elections, in terms of polling, should have completed. Anything after 8th February is unconstitutional. So as commission, you sit and say, how do I fit? And I think that's what the chair was talking of earlier. We looked at the period remaining from the time we launched the revised roadmap. So how do we fit? Because we know where we are going. If I'm walking from here to the gate of Protea, it's very easy to decide on the means of transport. I would say I can walk. It can take me a short time. So even here, looking at the time frame remaining, we had to decide. But also we are guided by Article 59, which gives Ugandans the right to vote. So even with the COVID, Ugandans have the right to vote. So the commission did sit and consider the risks posed by COVID, looking at the characteristics of the virus, looking at the characteristics of the elections in Uganda, and compared the risks, looked at whether there are possible mitigation strategies in the circumstance, and the commission was convinced that it's possible to have the elections. So it was found it possible that even with COVID, if all as a country agree that our lives must be protected and that we must also enjoy our democracy, it's possible to have the elections. Therefore, that critical analysis was done, and alternative mitigation measures looked at, and these were also in the consultations with Minister of Health. And remember, stakeholders, government at the time had banned all activities. But as Commission, we said, we think we can have the activities if, as a country, we agreed that we can protect ourselves. So we went on and had dialogue with the Minister of Health, presented what we thought are the mitigation measures to safeguard the health of the Ugandans and all those involved. And we said, yes, for us, we are convinced. And we were able to convince them that even with COVID, we can still move ahead. And we are going to try and discuss some of these measures. Now, what did this mean? That some of the measures to achieve that are limited in nature. That there is no way we can have our electoral activities the way we would have loved to have them. So it's a give and take. However, it's been noted that the health and safety of citizens, the voters, the candidates themselves, the election staff, and even the security personnel, the observers, must be prime on the agenda. This means that we need to look at modes of carrying out our activities in the least risky manner, and if possible, avoiding substantially person-to-person contacts. As the chair has already highlighted that at the time of the pandemic, we had the roadmap running. And I think stakeholders agreed to that this roadmap was launched on the 11th December 2018. And at that time, we were told, why early? Now, some of the people are now saying, why are you rushing? We are not rushing because we launched in 2018. So, at the time of lockdown and suspension of the roadmap, we had a number of activities coming. I may not dwell so much in those activities. I want to go and look at our analysis of the risks posed by COVID-19 for each of our activities that we have to conduct since resumption of activities under the revised roadmap. The first activity, stakeholders remember we had just completed display of the voters register and we had just retrieved the returns. So we started by processing of the register. Now, processing of our register, we use quite a number of people. So the attraction of large numbers of people is a risk under COVID-19. These are materials. They move from one person to another. So they also pose a risk. And the space we normally use has been very, very small. And normally we have staff, even some who use public transport. And at the time, there was no public transport. So we considered, and the discussion was, how do we achieve the processing of the register? We had to increase on the working space so that we observe the social distance. We had to pick our staff from their homes and back to their homes to minimize. And as we picked still in the vehicles, we cognizant of the issue of social distance, we had to make sure we provide them with face masks and hand gloves because they are touching paper, which is also risky. We also did provide at our workplaces hand washing facilities, the water and soap, so that, and encourage people to continuously wash. And we had to do regular cleaning of the rooms and desktops where our staff were working. And we thought those measures helped us, which activity we are concluding. And so far, we do not have any casualty, meaning, indeed, these measures work. Nomination of candidates, that's the other activity coming. We all agree, we have seen the nominations. That's fun fair period, attracting so many people, exchanging materials, because the aspiring candidates pick forms from us. They move these forms for supporters to sign. They take these forms to judicial officers for commissioning. They return these forms to us. They go to banks to pay money. All these are exchange of information and person-to-person contact, and there's a lot of risk there. So the mitigation measures being proposed are, one, we are going to minimize the risk by providing a downloadable nomination form. For those who don't want to pick from our office, who are not that we are not going to provide hard copies, we are going to provide, but someone will be able to go on our website and download the form and print at their convenience in a safe way, which minimizes the risk of person-to-person contact and the exchange of the forms. We are coming out, we shall have rigorous, and I thank UNDP, they have accepted Chairperson this, so that we have a rigorous publicity and campaign program that's going to carry both messages on COVID-19 and electoral messages, so that as we do elections, we remind the people that this virus is around and it's dangerous. We think that strategy will also work. We're also going to use, in the past, we have had large workshops teaching people about elections. We are not going to do that. We are going to do that through TVs, through radios, through the print, and we are going to do some posters so that, and use the social media platforms to reach out to the various categories. We also expect that for nominations, aspiring candidates should appear at nomination centers in person as by law required, but as they do so, they have to be wearing face masks for the purposes of COVID-19. And unlike in the past, where some would be accompanied by buses full of people and lorries, we are now saying, and the law only requires that they appear in person with the nominator and the seconder. That's the legal requirement, and we are saying that will be it. So an aspiring candidate will turn up with the proposer and the seconder, and all the three should be protected as per the measures provided for COVID. Not the mass numbers people have been moving with. Those ones are not going to be allowed, and really they are risk in the circumstance. We also, in discussion with the Minister of Health, to deploy at our nomination centers health workers, so that as people come in, whether the election staff, the security, the aspiring candidates and their supporters, people will be checked on the temperature, and there will be measures in place to make sure, in case the temperature indicates someone should be able to be assisted. We are going to increase on our working space in terms of the nomination centers, much as we are limiting the numbers. We are going to provide protective wear to our staff to protect them from, even when the candidates are coming protected, we are also providing protective wear to our staff who are conducting the nomination. We are going to place hand washing facilities at the nomination centers, and we shall enforce, if an aspiring candidate, even as you wear the mask, we are going to ask that you wash your hands if you have to access the nomination center. And we are going to make sure we have people to regularly clean the places where people will be sitting, where we'll be touching the furniture in the room, the nomination center. Campaigns, and I think this is the area of contention. We know our campaigns, what they are. In the past, these are areas of huge gatherings. Yes, there is a discussion that they still can go on with the social distance. I'm not sure we can enforce the campaigns we have been having and you enforce social distance. I'm not sure. But there are risks because of the large numbers, the exchange materials, posters, T-shirts, and so on at campaign rallies. These are also a risk area. Candidates and their agents move in the communities, soliciting for support, at times door to door. We think that's also a risk area. It's one of the risks. And then the security and election staff mix with candidates during these periods. In the past, we would mix freely, even hugging and so on. But I don't think that can happen now because of the risks involved. Even the modes of transport, we have seen cars overloaded with people. You find a candidate with so many people in a car. I think even this time, this is not going to be allowed because it's risky, not only to the candidate, because you're already nominated, but even to the people you may be moving with. Therefore, what are the strategies for mitigation? One of them is still we are going to do a lot of publicity and voter education to remind ourselves and our voters and candidates that COVID-19 is around and we need to protect ourselves as we remind them of the elections. We are also going to use the safe modes for our publicity and mobilization, and therefore we're asking our candidates that we use the safe modes to mobilize. And these are TV, radio. We are discussing with the Minister of Health the use of posters. At first they were like, but posters, they also, people are going to touch. So we are trying to work out how do we minimize the risks in the exchange of posters. In our case as EC, we are saying we are going to send posters, we are going to bundle parish level posters. So the first person to touch is here, the one who packs. The next person will be the parish person. So we shall have minimized In the past, we would take a whole batch to the district they count off. Now that counting off, we are saying no, because we want to minimize the number of people, and we shall ask that candidates may also have to use that so that they minimize the number of people touching, minimize how many people touch the poster. We think it's another way, because people need to know who are the candidates, and the poster can serve a great deal in that aspect. Plus other materials like leaflets, social media platforms, and these days they allow exchange of images and so on. So we could be able, we know there are limitations here, and we have also highlighted these limitations. Chairman talked of them, the coverage of the internet bundles and so on. We also we are appealing to candidates to use adult transport and observe social distancing, that they need to provide protective gear to their agents. We need to enforce, all of us, not only EC, even the candidates, the issue of hand washing, so that it becomes a culture. Maybe even after COVID, it's a culture we should copy after. We are also encouraging cleaning, regular cleaning of surfaces, even in the candidates' offices, in the political party offices, so that we are all protected, so that we are alive to reach the polling day and the day after. The other which I would love to talk about is the recruitment and training of election personnel. There are so many other activities, but because of time I may not exhaust them. We have a challenge here to recruit people and to train. You would agree we use large numbers of people. For example, polling day alone, we have about 35,000 polling stations. Each polling station, we are going to deploy about 10 people. Now, and the caliber of these people, it's difficult to train them by virtual modes. So we are going to train them in physical classrooms, but we are breaking them into clusters so that we're able to observe social distance. But some of the other groups, like our district level, regional level staff, we are doing training online. And we are doing this beginning tomorrow. Because these also attract a lot of people, and normally the spaces are not there. So we have to train them in batches to use the limited space to fit the people who can fit there. But we're also going to provide them with protective wear in terms of face masks and hand gloves. We are going to enforce hand washing, and we are going to encourage the cleaning of the surfaces. Come polling day. The polling day, we know normally large numbers of people turn up and they are in queues and they are lining back to back. We are going to make sure we deploy an officer specifically to enforce social distance at the polling stations so that we don't have that back to back. Also, someone to access the polling station will have to be protected in terms of face mask. The person will be required to wash hands because the facility will be there. All this to try and minimize the risks brought about by COVID-19. And then together we shall still continue with the other safe methods of mobilization, publicity, and voter education. And we think if we did this, we should be able to have a successful election. That apart, I think the last activity I want to talk about is tallying and transmission. We know our tally centers, like a nomination, they attract so many people because of the interest. Everybody wants to know, after voting out in the polling station, they want to know at the end of the day who is emerging winner. So we are proposing safety measures at our tally centers. Candidates will be represented by only 2 agents, and these are the ones in the law. I know we have been saying 5 because we didn't have any threat. Now that there is a COVID-19 threat, we are going to stick to what the law says, that each candidate will be represented by two agents. And the reason is we don't have space. We would have loved everybody to come in and maybe, but space for purposes of social distance, it's not going to be there. We are going to make sure whoever accesses the tally center washes his or her hands. We are going to provide our staff with protective wear, and we are going to carry out regular cleaning within the room to make sure that the rooms are safe. Dear stakeholder, what are the effects we are able to see as a result of COVID-19 away from the convention? And we all agree that at the time of relaunching the roadmap, the revised, we had already lost time. Because as the chairman said, we had activities that were coming up in April, and by now we should have finished some of them. Now all of them have been put within. So because of COVID-19, we are going to have activities under new modes of mobilization and campaign. That's an effect. The activities will be under seriously reduced and limited time frames, but within the legal provisions. We are going to increase on our manpower deployments, like we didn't have someone to enforce hand washing and social distance in the line at polling stations. Now we are going to include those two on our deployment list. And of course, this means increase the costs. We have had to increase working space where we process data. We are going to increase working space where we pack our materials. This comes with increased costs, but all these are the effects because of COVID-19. The modes of mobilization are also as an effect of COVID-19. Nobody would have stopped rallies, because rallies, the people enjoy, as you can see, people dance, people, you know, it's an enjoyment. They enjoy their candidates. But because of the virus, it's an effect. We may not have to enjoy some of those. And then there are so many new costs because of protective gear. So those are effects. But after Commission going through all this, what was the Commission recommendation? One, that even with COVID-19, if we agreed as a country to continue protecting ourselves as we have done, it's possible at the time to still have our election. And hence, the Commission rolled out a revised roadmap, and we have attached, I think they will provide an abridged format. So why these time frames? Dear participants, as I said earlier, elections are a bit legalistic. Fortunately, the Ugandan context, the laws define most of the things. They are more explicit in telling us what to do. So there are three areas that determine how we set time frames for the activities. The first one are the constitutional directives that appear under the articles of the constitutions, various articles. The second one are the other enabling laws, the Presidential Elections Act, the Electoral Commission Act, the Parliamentary Elections Act, the Local Governments Act, and the other Special Interest Groups Acts, and the Political Parties and Organizations Act. These ones have a lot of provisions there that tell us what to do and when to do it. Then we have operational capacities and requirements, which also determine how much time you should take on an activity. For example, Article 59 says it's a right to vote, and it also directs government to put in place and ensure that all those who are supposed to vote, vote. That's a constitutional directive. And as I said earlier, as Commission, we do respect that and try to live and make sure all those who turn up to register get registered, and those who register appear on the register and they are able to vote. Article 62, as we have talked about earlier, it directs us when to conduct the elections. And Article 67 says the Commission shall ensure that elections are held at times fixed and notified in advance. That's why you have been seeing 2018, we launched in December because of this Article 67, saying you must tell the country early enough that these elections are coming and coming these periods. Some of the electoral provisions, for example, Presidential Elections Act, Section 8, says the Commission shall issue a notice in the Gazette appointing 2 days during which the nomination of candidates are to take place. Now, when we say 2 days of nomination, it's not our decision. It's a law. Even if you wanted 5 days, the law says 2 days. Section 4 of parliamentary says under multi-party political system, a public officer or anybody working with the government shall, in the case of a general election, resign his or her office at least 90 days before nomination. While they should resign 90 days to nomination, how do they know when there is nomination? So there is another section, I think Electoral Commission Act section 30, which requires that the commission informs the public in time to allow these people to resign. If we come up and say nomination is within 30 days and these people cannot leave the 90 days to resign, they will challenge it. So all these are some of the enabling laws. There are so many. I'm just giving examples that dictate when to set the time, how long the activity should be. Like a display, it talks of we must display for 21 days. If you want to display for 10 days, it's not allowed. And then after 21 days, display for another 10 days to give people opportunity to verify what was decided during display. These are all legal provisions directing the commission on what to do. What are those operational requirements? For example, for us to determine, to be able to have elections in the other 30 days as defined by Article 61(2), we need to fix nomination day. One of the issues considered for fixing a nomination day, for you to have polling day, you must have ballot papers. So there are operational requirements for us to produce ballot papers. I will tell you that, for example, for the coming elections, we are going to print about 186,986,900 ballot papers. You can imagine, 186 million ballot papers. Now, for you to produce those, and within those we have over 40,000 variations. It's quite huge. You need time to do that. For purposes of local government alone, for the printers, after we have awarded and handed over, they need a minimum of 45 days to print and deliver to the commission. So we come from the 30 days, come backwards, and say, when do we need these ballot papers? And when they arrive at our warehouse, we need the time to pack them per polling station and for each elective office. So all those issues are considered, and then we say, yes, if we have a nomination at this time, and that's why at times you have seen we have appeared, I think before Legal and Parliamentary Affairs Committee of Parliament, saying, can't you adjust the nomination? And we have said no. And the reason is, if you adjust from where we are and you move towards the end of this year, there is no way you will deliver ballot papers and have the election. And because of COVID-19, the time frames we have in the revised roadmap are so tight that any adjustment from there, moving upwards, it will make it impossible to have the election within the constitutional provision. Why? Because we have so many categories of elections. You can imagine, we're talking of presidential, parliamentary, but within parliamentary, we have so many. We have direct elected members of parliament representing constituencies. We have women members of parliament representing districts. We have members of parliament from the affirmative action. For example, members representing persons with disabilities, members representing workers, members representing UPDF, members representing youth. So all these categories, we must produce ballot papers. Then you come to the number and level of administrative units, because we pack by polling station, by parish. Now, all those, in Uganda we have quite big, 35,000 polling stations, over 10,000 parishes, almost 3,000 sub-counties. You know, going now to about 150 districts. It's quite huge. So really, in terms of preparing ballot papers, we need that time. So what does this result into? It results into some of the changes we have brought forward. That because of the time we have lost due to the virus, because of the legal provisions in place and the operational requirements, the revised roadmap is under reduced time frames, both to the Commission and the political parties. And we're asking that they will have to bear with us because within the time, that's all we have. But in doing that, we should ensure, and it's our desire, that we safeguard the democratic rights as provided under Article 59, and the safety of all of us, both the voters, the election staff, the security, the candidates. So the other change is that the activities should be conducted as much as possible in a contactless manner with limited physical human interactions. Physical, but we can. And when it is inevitable to have physical interaction, we have to observe the measures put in place to safeguard ourselves from COVID-19. That the mobilization, publicity, voter education, and solicitation of votes should be through TV, radio, print, posters, leaflets, SMSs, and all the other social media platforms. And this also means that the period for the election is congested. While, as Chairman said, by now we should have finished some of the activities. Even those activities which we should have finished, we have had it congest them in the remaining period. So it's quite a congested activity, and we are going to appeal to political parties to look at the revised roadmap critically so that they don't get late for any of the activities. Because I've seen a number of people out there, most of the questions people are asking are about Parliament, about local government, but we have about a week away, we have nominations of special interest groups, whereby now political parties should have identified flag bearers at village level. And I'm not hearing much about that. So I'm appealing to parties to again look at this roadmap. And in case there is any guidance required from us, it's our work. We are there. We are ready to really offer this guidance. Critically, those are the changes. That the only change critically is our safety. Like we are here in the past, nobody would be muzzling ourselves with these masks. We need to accept that the change has come and go with that in terms of protecting ourselves. Other activities, we are conducting them the conventional way. Like nomination, every candidate will appear as they used to appear. The only change, they will not carry the crowds they used to carry. Polling, everybody will appear in person, only that they will appear with masks, and they have to wash hands, as if they didn't wash hands at home. But these are issues we have to agree that they have to be in place, and they have come. And these are the critical issues. And at campaign, we may not see the enjoyable campaigns we have seen in the past. That's a critical change in the revised roadmap. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mlekwa. And now that we know about the changes and what the electoral roadmap looks like, many are asking the legalities in some of the changes that have been put in place by the Electoral Commission. And allow me invite the Deputy Head of Legal Affairs at the Electoral Commission to try and take us through the essence of the guidelines and what exactly they entail, especially looking at the legal implications and what Electoral Commission paid attention to. The Deputy Head Legal, kindly step forward. Thank you.
all of us who are seated here are above the age of 18, and health-wise, you've sat for so long. I'll just request you to stand for 1 minute. For 1 minute, respectfully. You can stretch. You can stretch while observing social distance, of course. I can see Chairman Mao has even moved for health break. It is fine. It is 1 minute. I've given 1 minute, please. And then you can kindly resume your seat. Thank you so much. Permit me, ladies and gentlemen, to follow in line with the previous speaker's protocol, in particular the Lord Chair's protocol that was elaborate. I associate myself with that. I wish also to thank NBS and indeed other online media that are part of us in this endeavor. The paper that we are asked to present, ladies and gentlemen, is Introduction to the Guidelines on how to conduct and participate in election, to participate in election in a COVID-free, or rather COVID-secure manner. But as you realize, the director's presentation was elaborate. So permit me just in less than 10 minutes to say this, that the scope of that paper, or rather of this paper, is that I have a preamble and a background. I have some crucial legal provisions that help in conducting elections, and then guidelines, measures, and all SOPs that are in place for ensuring elections are, for ensuring that elections in a COVID secure, for ensuring that elections are carried out, I beg your pardon, in a COVID secure environment, and then conclusion after that. But as I've told you, that last bit, I will leave it out. So what is our conceptualization of this topic that I've just read to you? In other words, the paper is giving an overview regarding measures or guidelines on how elections organized by the commissions are to be conducted in a COVID secure manner. How will all the participants be protected or be secured? Who are these participants? We have the candidates themselves, we have the agents of the candidates, we have the voters, we have security, we have observers and or monitors, we have the election officials themselves, among other stakeholders. The COVID-19 pandemic, as you know, has placed an unprecedented pressure on countries and states as to whether to hold or to postpone these scheduled elections. Our Excellency Malango has already given you a number of countries that have participated. Of course, there are also others that have carried out elections in this COVID environment. Of course, there are also others, given their legal regimes, that have extended, that have chosen to extend, or rather to postpone those elections. In other words, countries that should have done elections, that carried out elections now, but they have decided to have them adjourned and or postponed. So striking a balance between the two choices is not an easy call. Should the fulfillment of the social contract between government and its citizens come at the expense of endangering health and even lives? Or should the mass gatherings which have been inherent in our politics, in our campaigns for that matter, prevail over other considerations? So we need to strike balances. With the outbreak of that pandemic again, world over, and indeed our own government, I beg your pardon, declared lockdowns as a measure of fighting this otherwise, as they called it, invisible enemy, with the approval and advice of Ministry of Health, that also works together with the scientists as well as the World Health Organization, since we are living in a global village. Already, a number of human rights that are enshrined under the Constitution were accordingly curtailed in the lockdowns that we are talking about. So these lockdowns have had themselves, the lockdown themselves have had guidelines or measures such as masks, mask wearing, washing of hands and all sanitization, social distance, among others. Put in on any news media, BBC or the others, you will see them repeating these same guidelines. So as the government gradually eases and or lifts partially the lockdown, because as you know, there are a number of other departments of economy that are still locked down, even the churches, as you know. So partially, as the government eases, the Commission, as indeed previous speakers have pointed out, shared out the revised and or abridged schedule after it lost out on a number of process months, and accordingly invited and or visited a number of stakeholders. We reached out to a number of them, media houses, as well as Parliament, among others, for reactions and or proposals from them on how to handle this remaining part of the roadmap in our elections. So these measures are for purposes of, among others, ensuring the safest possible environment for voters in light of this pandemic, and others who may not be voters but are participating around the elections. So what are the crucial legal provisions for carrying out these elections? I will repeat the section 60, the article, I beg your pardon. Article 61(2) of the Constitution as amended, in essence, defines the electoral cycle in this country. It is the precursor and or one that gives the command and or a guiding yardstick to the Commission in establishing electoral timeframes. I will not repeat what the words verbatim are saying, but we just know that within the last 30 days, or rather within the first 30 days of the last 122 days becomes the first day. And as the director has already told you, practically, he says that, those first 30 days commence on the 10th of January 2021 and end on 8th of February 2021, where all these activities should have taken place. Permit me to cite Article 67, which is also very important. The director also cited it, Article 67, Clause 1 of the Constitution, which is to the effect that the Commission shall ensure that elections are held at times that are fixed. And then it goes ahead to have the same notified in advance to the public. Another key article, which is as well crucial, is Article 1051 of the Constitution, which is to the effect, as I abridge, that the President holds office for a term of 5 years. And this article, it is important to note that, is entrenched, meaning it would necessitate a referendum if you wanted to cause some amendment. on it, Article 105, 1, which is saying the term of the president is 5 years. So you would need a referendum. And in essence, a referendum is another general election which would also require campaigns, which would require these SOPs that the director has just here outlined and discussed. The other one is Article 77.3. Article 77, Clause 3 of the Constitution that establishes the term of the parliament, the term of the office of the parliament. The same is also 5 years. And then there are also other articles within the same Constitution that say the same things for purposes of local government, that all local governments shall also last for a term of 5 years. Permit me to just quote one section in my paper here, Section 21 of the Presidential Elections Act as amended. That is to the effect that the Commission, that section is the effect that the Commission, of course, subject to the Constitution, is expected to determine the manner and the period during which campaigns shall take place, and then shall again go ahead to publish the same in the National Gazette. That is provided under that section. But as I've told you, it is being done subject to the Constitution. So the foregoing constitutional provisions are also replicated in other legislations. For instance, under the Electoral Commission Act, they say the same things. Under the Presidential Elections Act, the same things are said. Under the Parliamentary Election Act and the Local Government Act, as well as the acts that provide elections for the women and other special interest groups, together with the attendant rules and regulations that go ahead to say this. Otherwise, for purposes of the guidelines, which I should have now delved in that the Commission is doing, the director has ably spelled them out. I would be doing duplicity if I went through them. They are basically the same areas. So basically, that's what we can say about these guidelines, how we can conduct and participate in election within a COVID secure environment. The rest of the discussion that I should have given has already been made, and to save time to allow us have feedback from you and discussions, I can say thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Enoch Kugonza, the Deputy Head of Legal. Lawyers always move with a lot of documentation because there has to be a lot of proof to everything they say. So our next discussion is going to be a panel of a number of people. So for us to be able to get ready for that, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we'll strictly adhere to 5 minutes. Use that for a health break, use it to stretch through, use it to know your neighbor if they come and match later. And directly after that, we'll go into our panel discussion, and right after that, the plenary. A few questions that are coming through on social media using the hashtag UGDecides2021. We'll also be paying attention to those. So for now, we'll take a break, both on TV but also right here, and we'll be back after 5 minutes strictly.
Saying you want the best for them hardly describes it. You think about them 1,000 times a day. You're their best friend. You're their biggest fan. You're his right-hand man. And to think, one day you'll wake up and the little ones will be grown adults. Until then, why not enjoy the ride?
At Latto, we provide you with nature's finest milk.
So you can nurture them, love them, do what you do best. Latto, start the day with love.
COVID-19 has changed the world, but despite the challenges, Africanacity is still alive in Uganda. It's in the tenacity of the men and women keeping us going. It's in the creativity you use to work, teach, and do it all. And it's in the ingenuity of all those who are making a difference. Thank you to everyone still getting things done. Your Africanacity inspires us.
Are you looking for a delivery or a ride? MacBorder is here to make your life easier. Simply get to your smartphone, go to your Google Play Store app, search for the MacBorder app in your search bar, download the app, fill in the details to get registered both as a user and get to enjoy our services and benefits from MacBorder. We are just a click away from your pick. Are you a border rider? Are you seeking for a border? We bring you MacBorder Driver app with awesome benefits. Simply get your smartphone, go to your Google Play Store app, search for MacBorder Driver app in the search bar, download the app, fill in the details to get registered as a rider. You will receive a code which authorizes your account. For more inquiries, call us on +256 759 804 100 or +256 770 388 860 or send an email to care@macborder.com. We are located at Plot 5, Valley Cave, Ntinda, opposite Eliana Hotel.
The wait is over. Hello Uganda. Welcome to the first episode of the Samba Sports Quiz. Wanukusanyuka TV ne banafaba MTN abagizi omupiira gwa Uganda number 400,000 shillings. Abamanyi COVID kyatukoze babadde mu lockdown owa boda atakola owa taxi atika babiri ababiri mpocha abasatu omanyi tekitegeeza nga capital wo yagwawo olw'ensonga za COVID. Ekibuuzo ekisooka tuwe bafufa presidents babiri abasembayo nga Engineer Moses Magogo tanaba kubeera nga akwata ente.
Florence Mulindwa ne Onkulu Kakaire.
Tiganye tubuulire eyali omutendesi wa tiimu ya Vipers mu season ya 2017-2018. Watoizayo yevuddemu ng'ayomba ne nnyazaala we.
Omutendesi wa SC Vipers bamuyita.
Showing on Sanyuka TV every Wednesday, Thursday and Friday at 4 p.m. Samba ne MTN, brought to you by MTN, the #1 supporter of Ugandan football.
Everywhere you go, MTN.
Okay, let me get my driver.
Hey, special.
You don't have to struggle looking for a border or cab anymore. Simply go to your special app on your phone and request for your cab or border ride. Type your destination to know the estimated cost of your trip, then sit back, relax, and enjoy your ride.
How does he know where we're going?
Yeah.
I want that app.
To get your special app, simply go to your Google Play or App Store and download your free app to enjoy the most convenient, reliable, reasonably priced, and most secure border and taxi service in Uganda.
Special. You are special.
Particular you and me, you and I and you, when you win, I win all the soul, when you dance, I dance all the soul, Uncle Somebody up at President, Mommy now what you are trying to hear, together I see we are winning, me and we, him and the sheep.
It's Momo Yabo together. Use the My MTN app or dial *165# to pay for airtime or bundles and stand a chance to win up to 5 million shillings every day for you and those you care about. Catch the Momo Yabo show at 8:20 p.m. Monday to Friday.
Straight to your living room, we bring you our total church on air with uplifting worship and an enriching word of God in this season. Tune in every Sunday at 10 a.m. on NBS TV. Let's stand together as we learn how to thrive in tough times. Standing for office, it is that season again. The elections are fast coming and you need to reach out to your electorate. We at Next Media know that with the campaigns being scientific, you're probably worried about how to approach everything. Come to the Political Command Center today and let's get you sorted. Through our platforms and over 40 media partners across Uganda, we can get you to all your potential voters in an instant. Call 0707-730-641 to book your slot today. NBS, your Political Command Center.
So, because of the current lockdown, your home has now become an office and a classroom. We at Roke Telkom want to make your life easier. With Roke Plus Internet, you get to work and study from home at no data cost. Attend that meeting. Be in the classroom without worrying about your data running out. Email sales@roketelkom.co.ug to subscribe today and get a 40% installation discount. Visit our website for more information. Stay home, stay productive, and stay safe with Roke.
Roke Telkom.
It's time to shut it down. Next Radio presents Zikiza, the biggest celebration of Ugandan music. If they can sing it, it's time to kick it. Every Thursday at 5 p.m. Nominate your dream duo by using the hashtag NXTZikiza and we will make it happen. Catch Zikiza live on air and online. Next Radio 106.1. Big hits.
We remember the times when you used to visit your salon and stylist and left well pleased, looking beautiful and feeling confident that you'd turn heads at that party, that wedding, or at your friend's kasiki. It's always our pleasure helping you to accomplish your beauty needs. But as we face COVID-19 together, your health and safety are important to us, and that's why we encourage you to stay safe by using Movit hand wash, Movit herbal soap, and Movit body milk soap for at least 20 seconds, confident that you'll keep COVID-19 at a distance. Let's stay positive, enjoy time with family, and rest assured that as a country, we'll overcome the coronavirus. Movit, all day confidence.
As Uganda goes to the polls in 2021, Julius Buchana, news reporter and anchor, will be reporting live from the Political Command Center.
Camon 15 Premier comes with 3 GB MTN data automatically every month for 3 months and 100% bonus on every data bundle purchased. All you do is place your MTN SIM card in SIM1. Get yours today from any Techno outlet or MTN service center near you.
Techno, in partnership with
Amref Health Africa Uganda, together with its implementing partner, White Ribbon Alliance, are organizing a national intergenerational e-dialogue as a post-activity to commemorate the World Population Day 2020 with a global theme, putting brakes on COVID-19 pandemic and safeguarding the rights of women, girls, and vulnerable communities. Keynote speakers will include Dr. Patrick Kagurusi, the Head of Programs, Amref Health Africa, Dr. Dina Nachiganda, Assistant Commissioner, Adolescent and School Health Division, Ms. Angela Nakafero, Commissioner, Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development, Ms. Faith Myra, Youth Community Coordinator, SRHR, Alliance Uganda, Reverend Dr. Paul Kakoza, Director Education Services, Church of Uganda, Dr. Sabrina Chitaka, happening this Thursday, 16th of July from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. live on NBS TV and on all social media platforms and Zoom. This program is funded through the Health Systems Advocacy Program with funding from the Dutch Foreign Ministry in the Netherlands.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen who are watching us over the various social media platforms, Electoral Commission platforms, UNDP, as well as NBS Television. We are also live on Capital FM. We're live on Arua One and a number of other radio stations. Engage using the hashtag UGDecides 2021 for your questions and comments. We're going into our panel discussion right now. We'll have about 2 panels, which will be moderated by the Election Commission spokesperson, Mr. Jotham Taremwa. And without wasting any more time, I hand over the mic to Mr. Jotham Taremwa.
Thank you, Mildred, and thank you all. I hope we stretched a bit and we are now a little better than we were. Allow me to thank the presenters who were here. Thank you very much, including the Lord Chair for the wonderful presentations. Thank you very much. But before I invite the members to make their comments, allow me to recognize the Electoral Commission family that is here. Members of management, colleagues from Electoral Commission, please stand up for your recognition. Thank you. This is your event, so I wanted to make sure that everybody knows that you are around and you are in charge of your event. But also let me use the same opportunity to recognize the UN family members who are here. UN/UNDP, Annette, Lucy, Sheila, please stand up for recognition. Members of civil society who are here, please stand up. And even those veterans of the civil society who are here, please stand up for recognition. Members of the media, thank you very much and welcome to this session. We have 2 panels, and because of time, we had initially thought to give 5 minutes, but we seem not to be having 5 minutes for each. So I kindly request that we do 3 minutes, and then we can even entertain questions from the audience or from the online platforms, which should be answered when we are still live on NBS television and the other platforms. Before I begin, there are some questions I wanted the panelists to take note of, and maybe you can comment on them. As you are aware, this is an engagement. We want to hear a lot from you. We want to get your ideas. We want to see how we can improve our process, including stakeholder views. So question number 1 for the panelists. What is your take of our EC's engagement with the various stakeholders in the electoral process? What do you think of this engagement and the others that we have conducted? What do you think of the guidelines that we shared with you? What do you think of the... Thank you. What do you think of our guidelines? Give us your input. Tell us what you think. What is lacking? What should be improved? Are there any proposals on how we can improve the conduct of an electoral process? Do you have ideas that can help us? Are there any issues of inclusion specific to participation of women, youth, and PWDs that you would like Electoral Commission to take into account? Please share with us. And any other comments on our process? We will be very happy to hear from you, and we'll take every comment in good faith, because we are doing this to ensure that we have a process that is appreciated and supported by everybody. Once again, we thank UNDP for making this happen. We wouldn't have done it without your support. Who is our timekeeper? Because we want to make them 3 minutes. She's right here. The name? Maybe you need to sit closer. You can shift so that they get to see you. Okay, we'll do 5 minutes for each. Maximum 5 minutes. Without taking a lot of your time, let me take this opportunity to invite Justice James Ogola to make your comments in those minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I want to thank those who organized this get-together. It's critical. It's a critical time in the history of our nation. Nothing like this has ever happened before, and we pray that nothing like this ever happens again. In this twisted turn of history, the normal has become abnormal, and the abnormal is now the normal. In electoral terms, the public rally has become abnormal. And the scientific, I know that EC said, went to great lengths to say this is not scientific, but what is in a name, whatever you call it, I think to me it ends up as scientific. The scientific election becomes the norm. And then against all this reality stands yet another reality. The reality of our sacred nation's constitution and all the laws that flow from them. Elections under the constitutional norm are predicated on the doctrines of 1, free and fair elections, 2, unrestrained public interface between the candidate and the electorate, and 3, the known hallmark of the public interface is the mass public rally, at which candidates and electorate gauge each other face to face at close quarters. They dance and boo. They applaud and deplore. They cheer and they jeer. Needless to say, the constraints of the corona pandemic cannot allow this carnival kind of election. I call it the corona curtain. A curtain has been erected. Call it the corona curtain. It stands immovable, impenetrable in the way of mass carnival kind of elections. What then do we do with the fundamental rights of the electorate under the solidly written within the sacred constitution? The Electoral Commission has come up with a raft of do's and don'ts. Mask and sanitize and wash hands and only 2 people and distancing and so on. Wonderful. They've gone to extraordinary lengths to make it safe. And that's the way it should be. However, one asks oneself, why go to these extraordinary lengths to do the normal in the abnormal? Are there other alternatives? And I'm not trying to be critical to the Electoral Commission here. I'm simply going beyond the law. What the Electoral Commission has done is to try to build something within the existing law. But the existing law is the normal, and we don't have the normal. How do you create something in the normal using the abnormal? It begs the question. And my take on the whole thing is that the Electoral Commission has done a wonderful job in terms of their own mandate. What are they supposed to do within the law? And they've done a wonderful job there. But the elections are not about the Electoral Commission. The elections are for the Electorate. Where is the raft of things that the Electorate has brought forward to try to live within the norm, within this abnormality that we have today? The elections are about the candidates. Where are the candidates in this raft of measures that the Electorate, the Electoral Commission has brought forward? It was said, and rightly so too, that the Masterale gives the opportunity to the Electorate to express themselves, to listen to the candidate, to gauge the candidate at close quarters, and to be swayed. Mark you, there are people who come, election day comes, and they are not yet determined where to vote, whether to vote this one or the other one. They need to be persuaded. Now, if they are not going to meet at all by themselves, they will come only in a queue and wash their hands and sanitize and mask themselves. Something is missing there. Something that was in the Constitution, the spirit and soul of the Constitution, was not a scientific thing. That was not what was intended. The people here are shortchanged, so to speak, the electorate. The candidates equally, they're supposed to be in that carnival and persuade as many people with their body language, with their vocabulary, with their everything, with their touch, with their hugging. That is now denied. And at the end of it all, you ask yourself, why must we do so much to chase after the wind? In a sense, there will really be not the election that was intended by our constitutional framers. So why go everywhere and do everything possible to have it? In a sense, to hold elections, conventional ones, under these circumstances, is to let the people die. Are we then saying that elections at every cost, even at the cost of death? Or are there other alternatives? Someone touched on what if we say let this wait as we prepare ourselves, as we look for another alternative to scientific or to this forced, congested election? The query to that was, how long? But my answer to that is, where are we going? How long? 1 year? 6 months? As long as it takes to have a proper arrangement to address this abnormality, maybe. Another issue is, when you look at the whole thing, you get the idea that we are doing everything to dodge the articles of the Constitution which may not allow what we are trying to put forward. It reminds me, when I was chair of the Judicial Service Commission, there came a time when we had to choose a Chief Justice for this country. And there was a school of thought which said, let us do X. And we said, if you do X, you'll be offending Article so-and-so. They said, in that case, then we go to Article Z. We said, but if you do that, you'll be offending something else there. Then they said, okay, we can come back to X. And at that point came when I had to say, do we want to choose a Chief Justice of the Republic of Uganda by interpretation? Is that what was intended? There is a way to choose this person. Why must we go dodging A and B and C and D. This looks like what we are trying to do right now. We are dodging the washing, we are dodging the mask, we are dodging the sanitizing, we are dodging the distancing, we are dodging everything. But then what are we left with? A desert, a minefield which is unknown. There are mines everywhere, and you go dodging them, and at the end of it all, you establish a new government for this country. Is that what was intended in the soul of the Constitution? Is the Electoral Commission ready? They've said everything is congested. The timelines are now so critical. Ballot printing must be done now. Everything is tight. And indeed, the whole country is not breathing. We'll be going to the polling booths with the masks congested. We can't breathe. There's a knee on our neck. Can't breathe. Must we go through with this? Was there some other way? I raise all of this because I represent the Elders Forum and the Inter-Religious Council of Uganda, whose reason for living, raison d'etre, is to dialogue. And so I thank the Electoral Commission and those who are behind them, who mediated this one, who brought this get-together today to begin a process of dialogue. Let the people of Uganda get more and more of this and talk about the fundamentals of this election, not the technicalities of how to do it safely.
Thank you, Justice. In Africa, we fear to cut short the elders when they are speaking. So we use 10 minutes. The rest, I request that we keep within the 5 minutes. There is a whole community outside there and inside here that have questions and they would want to contribute to this process. So let's give them a chance, use our 5 minutes, and we'll give the rest a chance to comment. Thank you. Mr. Dan Mugarra from the Alliance for National Transformation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tarema, and the Electoral Commission with the UNDP to organize this stakeholder engagement. You all appreciate that talking after an honorable elder like Justice Ogora, who has ably talked about a field that only too well. He has broadly tackled the legal requirements, but even when the chairman of the Electoral Commission and other participants who were giving us the guidelines of their discussion, I asked Honorable Mao, whom I know is has a good article. You read it as a whole, because as the Honorable Ogora said, one article leads into the other leads into the other. So if it's a human being and you lose a leg, do you stop there? Or they get you some crutches so you limp on? So if you are saying that Article 61 impedes any other activity except holding the election, then you allow us to engage into what Political Party Organization Act mandates us to do. We have to carry out delegates conferences to endorse first the flag bearer of the presidential election. And the delegates conferences are not less than 500 people plus. So how do we organize? How do we endorse our candidates? Because our legal requirement says the delegates who form the National Delegates Conference are the ones to meet and endorse a party flag bearer for the president. So how do you facilitate us? If, for example, we identify a big playground like Nambole, and we agree with the Electoral Commission, with security, with the Ministry of Health, and we get tape measures, and we go and measure the distance, and so that we social distance, and we have 800 people who are distanced properly as per the guidelines of the Ministry of Health. Can you allow it? If you can't allow it, why is the Ministry of Health allowing social and distancing in Chikubo, for example, in the tax park? When you go there, you find thousands and thousands of people engaging in normal daily activities without even remembering that a mask exists. So how do we blend the two? The head of operations of the Electoral Commission talked about campaign mode, but we also, as political parties, need to train our agents who will train others, and they cannot be few. So are you giving us a chance to hold like town hall meetings where we get about 100 people, we train, then we scatter and also train again, because it involves a lot of people, and most of our agents don't speak a common language. So we have to translate, we have to move, then how do we solicit for signatures for nomination? Because we have to go into minimum 90 districts for the presidential flag bearer to congregate people and make sure they support your nomination. Soliciting someone on TV, on social media, on radio, may not be very easy. People want to look at you, want to hear how you talk, want to look at you in the face and see if you mean what you say. So politics is about looking at someone and evaluating. So how will the people evaluate us? Then you look at the guideline, the roadmap. You have the presidential candidates being nominated on November 2nd up to, so the campaign period goes up to 8th of February. Those are about 3 months. Then you look at the parliamentary candidate. Parliamentary candidates are going to be nominated on 12th of October, a month earlier before the presidential flag bearers are nominated. To you as the Electoral Commission, who should have more time to engage with the people? Someone who's going to handle the 45 trillion budget, the security of the country, the COVID-19, we may get even COVID-20 and COVID-22. So we need someone who has moved around and been understood by the people.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mugarra. You have exceeded your time by 2 minutes.
So in conclusion, I'm saying that the presidential flag bearer should be given more time for 135 districts vis-a-vis one constituency of a parliamentary candidate. And digital campaigns, if I go to a radio and they refuse me, do you have reprimanding capacity? Because if I lose that day, I have lost it as a candidate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Mugarra, 2 takeaways for me. Maybe you have also taken some takeaways from his comments. One is that if you lose a leg, do you stop walking and living? So meaning you have to move on. If you have challenges here and there, you still have to find a way to manage those challenges and move on. Then the other one, of course, is questions. I can see Lord Chair noting. I'm sure you get some answers. Let me take this, but before then, we have put the time on the screen. When you are making your comments, please keep observing the screen, and when it gets to 0, then make a conclusion. I don't have to really cut you short of what you are saying. Let me take this opportunity to invite Madam Regina Bafachi, the ED Accord, right? Ackford. They are too close. They are like first cousins, Ackford, Accord. But that is Ackford. She's the Executive Director. Please give us your comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the Electoral Commission and UNDP for having us come here. I'm representing the women of Uganda, and I'm going to talk about inclusivity, about the process, and the roadmap that you have shared with us. First of all, I would like to say that there is confusion. When we were presenting to us, you shifted from scientific to hybrid. Outside, we are already confused about scientific. Now you are giving us hybrid. I hope there will be enough time for us to go out and be educated about this kind of voting or election process. I would like to say also that in the roadmap and in all the presentations, I noticed one thing, that there is no inclusivity. And I know very well that the Electoral Commission has a gender policy. I'm hoping that moving forward, you are going to make sure that you make whatever you are preparing gender responsive. The reason why I'm saying this is that if we are to continue and have this hybrid sort of elections challenges that the women, youth, and people with disabilities are going to have. For example, if we are going to use radios, televisions, how many do we have in the country? What is the coverage? Have you established the coverage, and therefore have you put in place means and measures to actually address that gap? Are you going to work, for example, with the different networks? Are you going to work with the Ministry of Information so that we are able to have, say, waivers on OTT? Are we going to have complementary airtime for the women, for the youth? And when it comes to the people of disabilities, what measures are you putting in place to make sure that they actually either are helped with the different gadgets? There has already been a lot of violence related to COVID. How are you sure that this violence won't escalate? We know very well that control, access, and ownership of radios and TVs in homes has a lot of politics. You know, there are men who have the radios. When it is time for his time to listen in, he will actually insert the cells. When it is time for the woman and the children, he will carry away the cells and leave the radio that is blank. How sure, therefore, are you that we are going to have inclusive elections? The other is about the lack of skills and knowledge to access, utilize, and even benefit from the digital campaigning. Are there plans by the Electoral Commission to help these disadvantaged groups of people to bridge that gap? We also know that this time, the different civil society organizations, especially organizations like Action for Development, would be out now preparing and conducting civic education and voter education. But we also know that with the limitations, we are unable to do that. Are you aware, therefore, that we might actually get a lot of invalid ballot papers? Have you considered that? If I am to conduct trainings for the women candidates, what should I do? What you are actually presenting to us is about the election. How about when we are preparing? How should the women, the youth, and the people with disabilities benefit so that they can actually participate as citizens who will exercise their rights in choosing the leaders of their choice?
Thank you very much for keeping time. May I now take the opportunity to invite the President General of the Democratic Party, Honorable Norbert Mao.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. I'll speak in two areas. The first is about the fundamentals, and secondly, I'll talk about media, because the main arena for voter engagement is going to be the media. The first time I visited London as a young student, I used the underground train known as the Tube. Whenever a train stopped, there would be a loud voice on the PA system announcing, "Mind the gap. Mind the gap. Mind the gap." The gap between the train, which moves, and the platform, which does not move. My Lord Chairperson of the Electoral Commission, today we are engaging because we want you to mind the gap between what is convenient and what is right. We may not close the gap today, but your willingness to engage is worthy of praise. You know how much pressure we have subjected you to. You have tried to deflect the pressure to the Ministry of Health, to Parliament, but we have insisted. On behalf of DP, I congratulate you for this good beginning. We believe that the move from so-called scientific elections to hybrid is itself a remarkable step. Today, let's begin the process of unpacking the hybrid. We have some concerns as the key actors. Number one, consultation should not be sporadic. Let's put it in the timetable that every so often the key actors will meet. We should have a joint forum, because we may also be quarreling among ourselves, not necessarily with you. We also believe that you had the discretion to propose emphatically whether, according to you and the Ministry of Health, the elections were possible or not. You have told the nation that the Ministry of Health said the election should go ahead with some restrictions. You told us that the President directed you to the Ministry of Health, and whatever restrictions are dictated by the Ministry of Health guidelines. You have also acknowledged the problems that come with COVID-19, and that is why heavily on the provisions that give you discretion. This discretion is not absolute. That's why we are going to continue pushing you to exercise your discretion in the interest of what is right rather than what is convenient. Now, on the media, we note that over the last 2 decades, there has been a remarkable expansion of communication in the world. Ugandans are constantly inundated by the transmission of ideas due to the ubiquitous apparatus available for transmission of news, views, entertainment, information, and even propaganda. The vast network of communication penetrates all corners, no matter how remote. Daily, words and pictures intrude our surroundings. Our eyes and ears are continuously hammered by words and pictures. Today, a whisper can be magnified so many times due to the impact of various media. Democracy and media are now inseparable.
Indeed, democracy has now evolved into a mediocracy. The media, as a system of amplification, is critical in this season of elections amidst COVID-19. Media houses, and in particular talk show hosts, are going to wield so much power over public opinion to an unprecedented level. This power must be tempered with a high level of social consciousness and a sense of responsibility to promote socially constructive public discourse. The media can build or destroy. In 1994, over a short period of 100 days, over 1 million ethnic Tutsis were murdered in Rwanda in an orgy of violence that shocked the world. This genocide was accomplished largely because the media, especially the radio known as Radio Mille Collines, and its talk show hosts actively promoted the ideology of genocide. We can avoid and prevent genocide in Uganda by consciously looking for common ground among public actors, and you can facilitate its engagement through the Uganda Communications Commission. Elections should not be a struggle for survival. They should be a competition to serve. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mao and the panelists. Thank you very much for those comments. Can we give them a very big round of applause? I will request the panel 1 panelists to take your seats so that we can invite panel 2. But please, the audience, you can ask any question to any of these members who have made their comments, not only to Electoral Commission. So thank you very much. The claps were very big. They were divided into 2. The first ones were for the audience, then the last ones were for the VIPs. Can I now take this opportunity to invite members of panel 2 and the last one to take your seats. Honorable Jimmy Akena, the President of Uganda People's Congress, usually known as the party. You can step forward and take your seat. Honorable, the Chairperson of iPod, Honorable Asuman Basalirwa, absent with apology, he was here, so you're here to represent him. The Deputy Secretary General, Fred Kasaja, but from the looks he's not a Kasaja, he's really a Chisaja. You can take your seat. Then Henry Kasacha. Henry Kasacha. So we have Kasaja and Kasacha, don't mix the two. Henry Kasacha is the local representative of the Oslo Center. He runs a civil society. It is called the Democracy and Governance Training Center. Training Center. So he will train us in 5 minutes. Sure. In this audience. And then we have Mr. Crispin Kaheru. Kaheru is a veteran and are you a veteran yet? I don't think so, but he's an elections expert. He has been at it. So you're most welcome. We are going to use 5 minutes again. I raised some questions at the start of this session. I know you have your comments. Please give us those comments within a few minutes, 5 minutes or less. And let's begin with Mr. Crispin Kaheru. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jotham. And thank you to the UN family and the Electoral Commission for putting this together. I think it was my cry from the very start that the Electoral Commission, before it moves in to do anything, it should consult, and consult. So for me, this is a fulfillment of that aspiration. I'll just make very quick observations. First, I think we need to understand that elections primarily thrive on three key elements, and some people call them liberties. One is freedom of movement, that people have to move, to campaign, to meet, to coax for votes. The second one is the freedom of assembly, that people have to hold meetings, to further their manifestos. But the third one is the freedom of assembly, the freedom of association. In other words, that people have to associate, whether through political parties, pressure groups, alliances, coalitions, and so on and so forth. So anything that sets a limitation on those three key elements really has an effect on the very meaning of democratic elections. But I also want to observe that Uganda is lucky in the sense that it has examples and prototypes of that it can see from, of countries that have gone to elections during COVID times. Malawi went to its polls on the 23rd of June, and it had open air campaigns that adhered to health and safety measures. In some places they were observed, in others they were not. So people had to have masks, they had to hand sanitize, they had to keep social distances. In some places they kept the health and safety guidelines, in others they didn't. But what we see from Malawi is that on the 23rd of June, Malawi had about 800 cases of COVID. A couple of weeks later, Malawi has, I think, 2,400 cases. Then we look at Zambia, that has had just regional elections, 5 regional elections. And they put a limitation on numbers of people that could actually take part in a political meeting to 50 or less. But even then, we can see a clear pattern between the regions where these elections were held and the rise in infections in those particular regions. I'll not repeat the story of Burundi and its election. You know it. Now, Uganda is not Malawi, it is not Zambia, it is not Burundi, neither is it Benin. So I think Uganda must find its own model of managing its affairs. Even in the most critical moments like these, I think we should be alive to our capacities and capabilities. I don't think we should afford to take extreme views on any of, as we come up with our own model. Yes, the Electoral Commission has read out the guidelines, the standard operating procedures for each of the electoral activities, but we have to ask, do we have an independent oversight mechanism to monitor the implementation of these? You've seen the custodians of these guidelines are already contravening them. And I think for us that should be a very serious issue that we should be contemplating about. Where is the mechanism to monitor the implementation of these guidelines? Secondly, we seem to conceive campaigns as a one-way traffic, but campaigns are two-way. Political meetings are two-way. People have to ask questions. Have we thought through about the technicalities of how we promote interaction when we choose to go digital, like we've said? But also, I think we also need to learn from the experiences of the other countries, that many of the countries that have gone to elections during COVID have suffered very low voter turnout levels. How are we doing in terms of our voter mobilization and voter education ahead of the 2021 elections? We're about 6 months away. So for me, I think what Ugandans want is that sincere assurance that even as we embrace the changes that have been impressed upon us by COVID, the voters, the candidates, and all other stakeholders should feel that they will have a fair go at the election at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Crispin. You exceeded by 1 minute. You really tried. I know Henry will make it even shorter. Mr. Henry Kasacha, please give your comments.
Thank you very much. I also want to thank the Commission for this meeting and add that continuous engagement in our transition processes is very critical. It cannot be a one-off, because much as we are engaged in this room, there are so many other actors who do not know what is happening and who are only being fed by distorted narratives by everybody. We have liberalized the media, we are on social media platforms, there's too much fake news, so there is too much being shaped in the public eye. And all this affects the credibility and the integrity of the whole process. So I think that we need to have these consultations and engagements going on. Coming to the guidelines, I think that as a country, we have been fortunate that COVID has not yet hit us so hard. But the death toll of COVID worldwide is unprecedented. The fact that we have not yet had somebody die does not mean there is no risk. And that does not mean that we should ignore that. However, this COVID not only affecting lives and the economy, it is also having serious implications on democracy. And it's even worse in our countries that are just moving into democratic societies. Because immediately you impose a guideline, people cite unfair play. So there is too much suspicion. And this is an issue that we have to think through. Coming to the guidelines, yes, these are technical guidelines. And we appreciate that they have been made in the best interests under the law. And whatever is outside the law is not the mandate of the Commission. That's why this dialogue needs to be broadened to even other actors who need to be involved. If we talk about the guidelines, no mass rallies, that guideline affects the interaction with the voter. Even the public order management law that was very restrictive gave room for spontaneous activities. Now, being part of Ugandan elections, I find it extremely difficult for a district police commander to enforce these guidelines when all these spontaneous activities begin running around. If the candidates are not going to bring their forms, nobody is bothered. The EC can even pick their forms at night, even at midnight when everybody is sleeping. Those ones will not concern the candidates. But when the candidates hear that their candidate is going to one area, there is a challenge of spontaneous activity going on. And this takes us back to the issue of violence and all this that may come up. So as the police come up to enforce this no rally, no engagement activity, it may actually be very difficult for them to engage. I think we need to focus on the very fundamentals that if we need to protect lives, we need to have a free and fair process. We need to build this together. And unless we create that semblance that we are in this together and we shall deliver Uganda together, we are likely to continue having this tension all through the whole process. And this tension can be hijacked by anybody who wants to drive their own intentions. So I think that moving forward, we need to focus on the fundamentals. Yes, these guidelines are there. Are they adequate? Are they enforceable? Are they going against the fundamental rights? Because Article 43 provides the limitations on rights. If we institute guidelines that somebody can extend the limitation in the name of the crisis, have problems. And I also think that as a country, we need to look for dialogue at all levels to agree on how to deal with this health crisis, to avoid thinking that it is being used to impose emergency measures, to curtail democracy, to curtail this, but to build consensus on the risks and also build consensus on what has to be done. I think the bottom line is life has to be protected, and the law is there, and we can use the law to protect lives and have our liberties. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Henry. Can I now invite Kasaja? Mr. Kasaja, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Fred Kasaja, Deputy Secretary General, Justice Forum, JEMA, and a member of the iPod Council. Apologies from my party president, who stepped out because of other engagements, Mr. Vasarilwa, the summit chair. Mr. Moderator and the Chairman Electoral Commission, mine will be observations. When we hear you speaking, it is as if you are that gentleman from Iraq. Honorable Mau Obi from Namyango can always help me with the name. He used to sugarcoat whatever he was packaging. And I come from a marketing background. I always sell items. I know how to twist words in order to attract my customers. Chairman of the Commission, you are doing the same. What you are packaging to us smells like sulfur. For those of you who did chemistry, you know how sulfur smells. In the first instance, the moment you went to State House to make what you called financial consultations with President Museveni, then you came back to the National Consultative Forum and other political stakeholders to consult. You watered down all your efforts. We are very skeptical about the way you go about this whole process. Mr. Museveni must have given instructions to do what you wish to do or what you even may not wish to do outside the interest of Ugandans. But don't forget, Uganda is still here. It will stay for the next years as long as we have gone. In the room, I don't see some other political parties. I don't want to talk for them. NRM, they are still fidgeting with their electoral process internally. I will not mention other political parties, but that is one of the ways. So what do you expect in other political parties? That's why you have to answer so many questions, 1,000 of them, about this fraudulent, purported scientific election process that you are organizing. I will not have kind words, if you excuse me, Mr. Moderator. Article 61, as you quote it, clause 2, mandates you to call out an election expected to be free and fair. But in our eyes and interest of the majority Ugandans, we don't think this election that you are purporting to call on would be free and fair, given the scenario and the soft visit you made at State House. The EC has been our AWA, absent without apology, in carrying out effective voter education, leaving it out to civil society and other groups who oftentimes have not delivered, whereas the law mandates you to effectively carry out voter education, which you have not done. Who owns these media houses? There are people in the ruling class, the radios, the TVs. Political parties have had a bitter experience. We have been pulled out of radio stations despite of the fact that we have paid monies colossally to air out our views. And it's going to come. And you tell us that we're going to go for voter education through radios and TVs. How about the social media? We had an experience in the last elections. Social media was cut off by somebody. Is it Mutavaz? I don't know who is there. They keep on changing like dresses. Who is there? Anyway, social media, it is a problem. You control Eastern Jinja Road, you don't control CPS. For you, you say we have advised them to do this, then they advised to do otherwise. We shall have a cut off social media during that period of elections. And Jema's take is we stand for the elections to be carried on as normally prescribed by the law of the land, or alternatively, we postpone the elections until further notice when we feel that we shall have a free and fair elections. Uganda is not closing with Museveni, and it's not closing with you, Mr. Justice Byamukama. Not even me. You can still go on. We've been around. Kabaka was there. Obote was there. We saw Bina Isa and everybody. So in conclusion, the proposed revised election roadmap, Mr. Moderator, is an emptiness in the face of limited consultations in offing, tailored at galvanizing, vote rigging, and incumbents recycling. I conclude.
You have all heard. I didn't know Kasaja was chemical Ari. Nonetheless, we thank Electoral Commission for providing this platform to hear all the views. Can I take the honor to invite the UPC President to make his comments?
Thank you very much. I would wish to thank the UNDP and the Electoral Commission for organizing this stakeholders interaction. On the side of Uganda People's Congress, we have endeavored to do all the necessary activities for the general elections. And we greatly appreciate the efforts from the Electoral Commission to have these stakeholder meetings from time to time, as it gives us a position to air out the difficulties we face and the challenges as we go ahead with this process. I would like to point out from the very beginning that there's one key stakeholder who has been consistently absent in all of these stakeholder meetings. And this is basically the Ministry of Health. We talk about the health guidelines, but those health guidelines are not clearly spelled out as far as the politics is concerned. We are very clear that funerals are supposed to be 50 people, family. We are clear if you're entering a shopping center, you must sanitize, wash hands. All of these other guidelines are extremely clear, except when it comes to politics. And when it comes to politics, we are being pushed from side to side. Last time we had an engagement with the Electoral Commission, the chair tactfully said that we should do our politics but conform with the health guidelines. Left us in the blue. As we're trying to get into this program as UPC to set ourselves up for our delegates conference, we wrote to the police and gave the police our activities leading to the delegates conference. They wrote back and they said, you're free to do everything except regional conferences and district conferences, which was the purpose for which we wrote. But we shall liaise with Electoral Commission and follow the health guidelines. We don't know those guidelines. And all these processes which we need to do must involve meetings. Within the party structure, it is those conferences which are going to be the determinant to give us our candidates. So we must have those meetings. Even if we're to downsize, we must also try to remain within our constitutions. For example, for the delegates conference of UPC, for it to be a valid delegate conference, the quorum is 1/2. For the other conferences, the quorum is 1/3. So it is possible to reduce the numbers attending these meetings, but provided we still remain within that legal framework whereby we are still going to be within our constitution and avoid legal challenges thereafter, even from within our own parties. Because we do suffer those challenges after, especially primaries. You get those who are bitter, they will end up going to court and would run into a lot of those difficulties. If these matters were very clear, it would help us to move ahead. And also to add on to what Crispy raised, of recent we have seen the head of the Ministry of Health not abiding by the very guidelines which are still not clear. But some of those guidelines of gatherings, all of us would love to have gatherings. All of us would love to have our processions. But we have endeavored to do our politics as best as we can within the framework of what is generally agreed. Because it is clear globally, this corona has changed the way of doing things. We live in the most uncertain times. Nothing is what it used to be. But as we try our level best to handle the politics, to articulate our messages, but also to develop our, go through our processes, to present our candidates for the general elections, there needs to be some level of cooperation. And I would request that in the next engagement which we have, let the Ministry of Health actually be there and let us get some clear pronouncements, because it would help us to pass the message. I think Crispy raised the issue of in Zambia there was a minimum of 50. If we have a clear minimums, we would also be able to communicate within our party structures. And I've been pleasantly pleased that many of these other guidelines, even if you go to the deepest village, you find that people are trying to comply with these guidelines. You find hand washing facilities, you find soap laid out. So let us also be clear on the politics. Otherwise, we're in this limbo. And at this point, we still have a dilemma, because we've set our delegates conference for the 1st of August. I'm not sure how it is going to be, even if for some, if we, for example, we're able to secure the airstrip down the road to hold a delegates conference where there's plenty of space, even if you get the tents. I am not sure that we are going to be able to be cleared for such an issue. But if we have that engagement, and where we can agree that if I have half of my members to meet the quorum, and we do the social distancing and all the processes, I'll be comfortable moving ahead. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Jimmy Akena, the UPC Party President, and the members. Let's give them a very big round of applause. I'm sure that is very good enough. We can all go back and take our seats. We are going to begin a Q&A session. But before then, I want to request the chair and the UNDP, RR, and members of the commission to come back and take your seats so that you are able to listen to the questions or give comments. As you come up, take your seats. As you take up your seats, I have a question coming through from the social media. And someone is saying, not many people have not been working due to COVID lockdown, and therefore cannot subscribe to the decoders. So will the government pay for their decoders? Let us have a free and fair election. And the chairman is expected to respond to that question. My proposal is that, Lord Chair, there are some questions I am sure you took note of, and you probably would like to respond to, so that if anyone in the audience has a similar question, he or she can get that answer in advance and we save on time. But allow me recognize the presence of Dr. Siranda, the Secretary General of the Democratic Party. We recognize your presence, sir. So, Lord Chair, let me take this opportunity to request you to respond to some of the key questions that came through directly to the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jotham, and also our distinguished panelists for the tantalizing and not provocative. I don't want to use the word provocative. But if it is the provocation is in the area of intellectual debate and discussion, that is welcome. I don't want to look at the other provocation. No. I'm not easily provoked in those in that manner. But let me say this. Let me approach my responses in a rather holistic fashion. Why are we where we are? Why are we where we are? When the Commission launched its roadmap in 2018, they did deliberately hide or keep away this episode known as coronavirus. Could it by reasonable foresight have predicted that we are going to have a scenario that disrupts or that is likely to have an impact on the otherwise well-received roadmap, whose only singular complaint was, why this early? Why have you released this roadmap so early, Electoral Commission? Do you want to take the country on a trajectory of politicking and electioneering so early for a whole 2 years? That was the only query or concern that was raised then. I think it goes without saying that nobody, not even the best soothsayer or prophet, could have predicted that we are going to have this pandemic on our hands. So where is the Electoral Commission coming from? Is it deliberately orchestrating a process that denies the people of Uganda the exercise and observance of their liberties as enshrined in the Constitution, more so when those liberties are geared at fulfilling a fundamental aspect of the epitome, if I may call it, of their liberties in the manner, in a way that they have to choose their leaders every 5 years. It happens once in 5 years. Is the Electoral Commission deliberately out to curtail or to impinge on the freedoms and the liberties of the people in identifying their rightful candidates in a manner that enables both the candidates and the voters to gel, to know each other, to listen to each other, to observe the demeanor of the other, so that they can make an informed choice? What else could the Electoral Commission have done in the circumstances? Does the Electoral Commission within the law have the liberty to say, we cannot do it? We cannot obey the command of Article 61, Clause 2. Does that liberty exist within the law? I have searched through the Constitution so far as the mandate of the Commission is concerned. Understand me. In as far as the mandate of the Commission is concerned, there is no single article that says the Commission, you may, if you cannot comply with Article 61, Clause 2, then do this. It's not there. Therefore, distinguished participants, the Commission, cognizant of the matter before us, of this, as my senior Justice Gola has said, COVID has transformed the normal into the abnormal into normal. At no time since I was born did our women and other vendors have to be required to sleep in the markets with their merchandise. I'd never seen that. I have experienced 2 wars in this country. The war that removed Idi Amin. I was by then a student at university. It It was also devastating in its own way. I've experienced the war, the guerrilla war that brought President Museveni into power, or the NRA into power. At no time did we fail or were we restricted from going to our places of worship. I remember 1979, I think Kampala was being bombarded on the eve of Easter. But on Easter Sunday, we went and attended the church services. We were never restricted. But COVID-19 has done the unthinkable. No wonder some of the pastors are now mourning in the sacks and so on, said what is happening. All thanks to COVID-19. So I want us to contextualize where the Commission stands and where it is coming from. President Mao has said, yes, we must distinguish between what is right and what is convenient. What is right in my view is that the Constitution commands us, requires the Commission, that within this specified time, you must conduct these elections, come rain, come sunshine. That is right. Secondly, the people of Uganda are entitled to choose their leaders at regular times as specified in the Constitution. And the Commission being the vehicle by which the people of Uganda express those rights and exercise that function, we have to do that. So when we are making some of these criticism, like my brother Kasacha has done, I think let's be a little bit objective. Could the Commission have done things differently? That's why we are engaging with you. That's why from the 16th of June, we have been engaging with various stakeholders, and we are thankful to UNDP for having organized this wholesome engagement in a bid to discover other avenues, other ways we can improve on this process of enabling the people of Uganda in this new normal or abnormal, whichever way you look at it. How can the people's rights continue to exist? Just like we are not in a fashion show for us to move around with these masks. But it's because we want to live with a new normal or abnormal, whichever way you want to look at it. We would want our people to carry on with their normal campaign rallies as is known, so that indeed the people can access who is who, or assess who is who, and what is this thing. But you see, the new normal or abnormal does not mean for that. So what is the best way forward? We have said we are attentive and willing to listen to all views, proposals that will improve on this process. When we issued the press release and the revised law, we said, and I quote, that mass public rallies will not be accepted. We do not close out other possible avenues apart from the media platforms which could be brought on board to ensure that we address the challenges presented by COVID-19. One of the proposals that has come on board, I think the president of UPC has alluded to it, some stakeholders have suggested, why don't you have controlled gatherings? Here we have controlled gatherings. In this room, we might even be more than 50, whichever. We are looking at that proposal. And I have said, and I reiterate, that we are gathering as many views as possible, for we can come up with a comprehensive package of how this new normal or abnormal is going to be complied with in the circumstances that we are in.
Okay.
So please, let us be, you think I've finished all these questions before the Electoral Commission?
So I request that you wrap up a bit.
Mildred, what now are we? Mildred, we
need to engage the people here.
This issue of the president. In law, we say that he who asserts the existence of a certain fact has the burden to prove that is the correct version. I have given you my version as the person who led the Electoral Commission team to meet the president. I have given you the reasons as why to went to meet him. And we have said it was purely on the challenges we're having with the finances for the general elections to the new home we are supposed to move to abandon, to leave our current premises which are required for Kampala Forever project. People have come up with their own version. You've heard Minister Kasajja here saying, saying the president directed you to go and conduct this fraudulent process called an election. The matter is purely within your knowledge. The burden is upon you to prove that assertion. I have given you mine. I'm sure if we were to appear before my Lord Justice Ogora in those days when we were still practicing, and I take the Bible and take oath, and I will tell him, I was there, this is what transpired, this is what was said, and then for you, for me, I know, as long as they go there, they cannot come up with anything else other than this. Who will be proved? Who will be believed? You who is on a conjecture, or me who is speaking from a position of fact, as witnessed and heard by myself. And I said, it is then the president raised, for him his concern was the lives of the people. How are we going to hold these elections when we have this pandemic? And we said, Mr. President, lives, yes, important, but Article 61, as for us as the commission, the managers, the sole managers of elections in this country, commands us that this is the time, and that time is not moved by COVID. And that's when he guided. He's not direct, he guided. Said, then in that case, why don't you first discuss with the Minister of Health, the experts who are leading the fight against this COVID virus? Can you first go and discuss with them? Then you can come up, once whatever you discuss, you come up with your positions. We went and met with the Minister of Health officials. I was there in person. Who is to be believed? You who is being swayed by perceptions and conjecture and what not. We held a discussion with Minister of Health, and we looked at all the various options. Why were we doing all this? It was for the good of the people of Uganda. One, to ensure that they remain healthy and alive, free from the virus. Secondly, that they realize their constitutional right to elect their leaders in the given time frames, so that the current crop of leaders do not get time which has not been given to them by the people of Uganda. That is our mandate. That is our drive. That's what is driving us. And we are saying, how can we all address this? How can we all discover or realize that this is an unprecedented situation or scenario we are in, but we have to move on? Just like, I mean, could we have said, me, I cannot put on a mask, whatever they say, I would rather stay at home rather than moving around in a mask looking like a cartoon. We cannot say that because we have to get on with lives. So, Mr. President of DP, yes, what we are doing is in the interest of what is right, not what is convenient. And what is right is that the people must change you, the leaders, within 5 years. Why don't you want that? The 5 years are elapsing on 12th May. And what is right is that in doing so, the people must also be protected from the virus. And we are looking at all these other means, these other avenues by which this can be accomplished. Now, let me just one.
I give you 2 minutes because you will have more questions.
Yeah, sorry. I have so many questions, but I just want to end them up. I want the distinguished participants to assist the commission and say, for us, we would say, do this. Just like the proposal to have controlled gatherings. Good. What else do you have on board? But you say, Chairman, you are Chemical Ali. Chairman, you are Tariq Aziz. You say, Chairman, you are this. What does that help the people of Uganda? Doesn't help the people of Uganda. Bring tangible proposals that are realistic, that are achievable, that are postponed. You know, Mr. President General, you know who has the power to postpone. Can the Electoral Commission encroach on another person's territory? We shall be committing illegal trespass, which we are not supposed to do. We cannot do that, and the Honorable Kena is here. That is the preserve of a certain organ, a certain entity. And the Commission is not supposed even to lobby. We are not even supposed to wake them up. We are not even supposed. So understand the position of the Commission And we are saying, given the circumstances, mind you, this is not the first time this country has had a scenario of abnormality and yet held elections. We had a war in northern Uganda. President General Mao will bear witness to this. He was there on the ground as the chairman of Gulu district when we had that situation. And that is one of the aspects provided for under Article 77 in which an election can be postponed. But the Electoral Commission then went ahead and ensured that the people of northern Uganda, although they were confined in the camps, they too are given an opportunity to exercise their right and elect and participate in the election. So, in my humble view, ladies and gentlemen, let us stop the name calling. Let us stop the ostracization. Indeed, Mr. Kasache, you are right. Uganda will be there beyond me or beyond anybody. It has been there before. Those who were there in these positions, some of them are still around, some of them have already left. Uganda will continue. So Uganda will be there beyond 10th February 2021. It will be there beyond 12th May 2021. Uganda will be there. It will continue to be there. But the question is, you and me, who are alive around at this time, what did we do when we were faced with this very terrible challenge? What did we do? What was your contribution? Our contribution as the Electoral Commission is we are saying, working together with the people of Uganda, we can move forward this process and ensure the people exercise their constitutional right and at the same time remain healthy. Should we sweep all the gains that we have had by the people not dying from this pandemic in on the altar of exercising our democratic rights and our liberties of opening mass rally campaigns? After all, we have not had a single death. It doesn't matter if we have about 2 or 3 arising out of campaigns. Are you willing to offer yourself or your child or your relative? I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. There is just a lot. So we go on with our questions. Mr. Mulekwa has something to answer, but I'll be coming back to you because I know many of the questions are directed to you. Aaron has a microphone. If you could just give it to one participant, and the lady seated next to Kaheru, move to the microphone right in the middle. Okay, and the next participant should move, the person having a question should move to the microphone right there. So Gerald, if you could just move to the microphone right there so that we don't take a lot of time. And as the 2 questions come through, 2 coming in from social media for Electoral Commission still. This is Okot Jr. who says, you buy airtime on a radio station, the radio station refuses to host you or you're rejected while on the show, citing pressure from above. What immediate remedies does the candidate have? That's one. Lucky Joan of Makindye says, I have not seen anything like re-election of LC1 leadership on the EC roadmap and programs. May I be enlightened about this? Let's go to the questions.
Thank you.
I'll give you 30 seconds each to ask. We will sanitize the microphones, don't worry.
Thank you. Thank you, Midrid and EC and UNDP. I'm Farida Lule and I work with the Citizens Coalition for Electoral Democracy in Uganda, CEDU. Chair, I would like to be assured that with a new hybrid election, is EC still safe? Because we've seen so many people right now going to court to sue the Electoral Commission. So are we still safe? Are we not contravening the Constitution? Then 2, I am surprised that we do not have any security representative in this meeting. And they have been at the center of making sure that they implement each and everything that they have had without even actually taking into consideration having a meeting to get assurance that what people on ground are doing is they are actually following the law. And they are going to be at the center of this election, either organizing it or disorganizing it.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll go to Gerald right on the microphone. I'll ask Aaron to move the microphone to the next participant, the lady right there.
My name is Gerald from the Democratic Party. This morning I came from Palisa. And Chairman and the team, I appreciate you for what you're doing. Because what we need is a sense of ownership. and I know that tough times calls for tough people, but we seem to be doing the regulations for Kampala metropolitan or towns. In my village, there is nothing. This thing we are speaking about is not there. You get there, they were giving mosquito nets, people are gathering. And in Palisa, if you talk about the digital, in my village, there are 2 people that have phones, social media, that can access social media. I think the reality is we should get to the ground, use our district returning officers that are at the ground, so that we do these regulations that also favor people that come from our areas. Okay. If I want to speak on radio, I go to Mbale or Kumi. There is no radio station in Palisa. The other last question is, how are we going to ensure that whatever we do is within the law? Because the law says we shall have 2 agents each, and if you have 21 candidates, how will you ensure? And the law says they should be seated within the close range of observing what is happening. And police is as well using the regulations or the revised roadmap to even block smaller meetings of this caliber. Okay. I think it will be very important for Electoral Commission as well to engage the police so that political parties can do their internal meetings. For me to present Honorable Norbert Mao, my candidate and presidential candidate, has to be a party president who has to go through a process of the National Delegate Conference. The college for presidential candidate for DP is the National Delegate Conference. All right, how do we work as within parties to avoid litigation so that we present candidates to you?
Thank you, Gerald. Joseph, move to the microphone. Lady, ask your next question.
Thank you very much. I'm Carol Bunga Idembe from Interreligious Council of Uganda. I just want us to have 2 scenarios. The scenario that the chairperson of Electoral Commission has painted is kind of the mild situation. And we pray that once it goes on well, we'll have the plan A. But if people start dying, please also have plan B, so that we are able to stop the elections. I know it is not in your mandate. It is Parliament and the President and whoever. I think we need to have plan B, because the way we are painting the picture is that everything is going to go on well. So plan B, we need to have it, and it will be well with us. I know when we are going like this, we have prayed, God has heard us. But in case the worst scenario comes, let's go on. Then the second one is the youth. My own children cannot even allow me to watch news. I struggle. They have their own programs. They don't want, mommy, always you're listening to news. So how are we going to bring on board the young people?
Okay. Thank you very much. Joseph, use the microphone. Aaron, move the microphone to the next.
Thank you very much. My name is Joseph Sabiti, a journalist with NBS Television. My 2 questions. The first one is to my Lord Justice James Ogola. I listened to you with a lot of attention, and I'm asking, where in the law is the suggestion that you're putting forward grounded? Is there a legal framework that supports that suggestion? And to my Lord, the Chairman of the Electoral Commission, you keep talking about health guidelines, and many political players look at it as an abstract. Would you mind unpacking these particular guidelines in relation to our electoral activities? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll take on just 2 more questions. One, do we have any? All right. Aaron, kindly give the microphone to Mr. Mlekwa. He had to respond to some answers, to some questions, and then we'll get back to the panel right here.
Thank you, moderator, and thank you all distinguished participants. I think this is healthy because we have to discuss, and we're all concerned about our country going forward, even after elections. Not that elections should be an end in itself. Before I attempt to answer some of the questions, I want to pose a question. If we had time, maybe we would go into some academic argument and say, if EC had issued a statement saying because of COVID, we have postponed the elections. If we're here discussing that question, I want each one to visualize what would be the discussions. I think still there would be stones being thrown at EC why you have postponed the elections. Now that they said, even with COVID, as I said earlier, if we agree as a country, it's a give and take. I'm sure doctors recommend a balanced diet. In my house, I can't afford a balanced diet, but I live on. I'm not sure at what age in my life whether I have ever had a balanced diet, but I've been able to live on up to this age without a balanced diet. So let's look at that also. There were some specific questions, and I also am going to raise issues for me, which as operations I should be able to take on moving forward, because we have come here to learn. I've definitely learned from our elder, Justice James Ogola, the spirit of the Constitution. And my take is, in all we do, in whatever circumstance, I think we need to come up with programs to motivate the population so that they see that even with this, it's important, first, to protect ourselves. It's important also to have the elections. I think that's very critical for me. Mr. Dani Mugarura, the delegates conference, town hall meetings, I think these are issues under discussion, and the chair has said. I think we are going to work on this and see how we come out with a maximum number so that the parties are able to regulate.
Okay.
Why less time for presidential candidates campaign? Well, this is a very long, if I was to give this answer. Again, it first takes me on what we require. Presidential candidates will require very little time to prepare a ballot paper because it's only one variation. Now, parliamentary, the variations are as many as the various seats in parliament. So it takes a little longer. And that's why at one time someone asked, why can't we have local governments, because they have a smaller area of coverage. But the variations in local governments are so many for us to process ballot papers. And without an election, as I said, we cannot have ballot papers.
Mr. Muleka, 1 more minute.
I'm not sure it will be enough. Yes, Madam Regina, inclusiveness, I think right now we are working on some of these issues with UN Women, and I'm sure we are going to have issues of gender responsiveness brought on board. Issues of turn-up and mitigation of invalid votes, we are going to be rolling out our publicity and voter education programs, and we are mindful of those too. Mr. Kasaja, I think it's unfair to say the current electoral process is fraudulent. For goodness sake, it's unfair, because it's not. Just because campaign, we have said no mass rallies just the campaign makes the election fraudulent. It's very unfair and unfortunate for our country. EC does not conduct voter education. It's also not true. We conduct voter education. Okay. I think it's confusing voter education with civic education, which is not a mandate of the Electoral Commission. I think the Constitution is clear on whose mandate it is to conduct civic education.
Thank you.
Need to bring means of health, security in these interactions. That's a take for me.
Okay.
I think we should be able to see this going forward so that they also give response to some of the issues coming up. The other take for me is, yes, Madam Caro, Plan B, true. We are planning all this. What if the situation became impossible to proceed? What happens? I think not only EC, I think all of us as a country, we should be thinking of Plan B. What if? But as EC, as in charge of operations, this is a take for me. We are going to look at it. If things became not possible to move forward, even when we have started, what do we do? I think we are going to come up with that. I think a planned and a timetable for regular interaction. I think this is also so that people can know when is the next interaction I think that helps. One, in terms of time management. Two, even those who are not attending, it's easy to follow the discussions, because if I've not picked something in this meeting, and I know that next week there is another one, maybe on this day and this time, it's very easy even for me to have my questions
Thank you, Mr.
put into there.
I don't want to ring the bell.
Briefly, I wanted to say that.
Thank you so much, and I love the take-homes. Those are very key. Justice James Ogola, kindly, if you could respond to one of the questions. There is a mic right behind you, if you don't mind, or let Aaron bring you that. It is sanitized.
Thank you, Ingrid. The question was asked, where is the authority to postpone the election, to wait for another time? Justice Byamukama is absolutely spot on. That does not lie in the mandate of the Electoral Commission. They cannot postpone the election. It lies elsewhere. We, the people, Parliament, and other fora. And so when I spoke about, is this a matter of life and death, that we must go through this, knowing very well that maybe to have a vote, to do the vote, is to die. What I had in mind, can we wait a little bit, gauge the mood of the corona, where is it going, up or down, sideways or behind or front, and see what we can do with that. I think we have agreed that Uganda will be here tomorrow, the day after, we'll be here. Why not wait a little bit and do that? And therefore, the mandate to do that is not for the Electoral Commission. It's not for this forum where we are at. It's for all of us. If ever there was a reason and a justification to touch the Constitution, this is the time, and Corona would be the reason. And we'll put all our heads together and see where do we go. Is that Constitution adequate to do the postponing? If not, what can we do with it? Change it? And I say, this is the time and the reason to do it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Since many of the questions for the EC chair were actually answered, but you will respond to a few were answered by Mr. Mlekwa, and time is against us, I will ask the UNDP resident rep to kindly give her closing remarks before I get to the Election Commission chair to respond to a few that have not been answered, but also close the event.
Well, thank you very much, Mildred. And distinguished colleagues, let me say how delighted we are as UNDP and indeed the larger UN family to have partnered with the EC to open up the space for such spirited discussions. The fact that we've gone over about 1 hour just tells you that there's need for more consultations on such. I just wanted to thank you again, Your Lordship, Justice Byabakama, for really the leadership on this and your team and for us working together. I also wanted to thank colleagues who are watching online from different places for joining us and also sharing your views on the situation. For us as UNDP and the UN family, this is really something that is important. Like I said earlier on in my opening statement, ours is to remain apolitical as the United Nations, but importantly to help facilitate a conversation like this. What I'm seeing here is that there are, different schools of thought still. What I'm seeing here is that we are disagreeing on some things, but we are agreeing on some things. What is important is that we as a people can build consensus for Uganda, the Pearl of Africa. Whatever we do, like Crispin said, we need to be sure that we don't have extreme views and that we find common grounds. And for us as UNDP, this is what we are seeking to do. We hold and support 60 elections in a year. We do hope that we can bring conversations from other parts of the world, in Latin America, and Asia, and Africa, to support our people here. But just before I conclude, I just wanted to say a very warm thank you to our donors, with Austria here representing them, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, for really putting funding into this basket fund that allows us to have this sort of fora. And we do hope that those conversations can continue and that we can together as a people find resolutions on the way forward when it comes to the elections, but importantly, tying the elections to our development trajectory, because you cannot disconnect the two. So thank you once again, Justice and colleagues, and looking forward to another round where we can have different conversations, perhaps in smaller groups, and to see where we can strike some consensus around some of the thorny issues that are still pending. So on behalf of the UNDP family and the United Nations family, let me say thank you one more time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And finally, we will get our closing remarks and response to a few of the issues that came through from the EC chair. There was one on LC1 elections as well. Please.
Running out of time. One, LC1, LC2 are not part of these elections or electoral cycle because they were elected into office in 2018, and under the law, their lifespan is 5 years. So they are not part of this process. Theirs will come around 2023 or something thereabouts. Now, on the issue of radio coverage, Madam Bafaki, according to NAB, National Association of Broadcasters, they say they are, the radio stations in the country now cover about 98% of the country. That's what they say. But most importantly, on the issue of accessibility to the media, equal accessibility to the media, we are in talks, we have held talks with the National Association of Broadcasters, the Minister of Information, Uganda Communications Commission. UCC is coming up with guidelines that will facilitate the process of candidates having equal access to the media to the media platforms, especially radio stations, without being capped by the fact that many of these radio stations are privately owned and by practicing active politicians. So that one is being worked on. I want to assure the people of Uganda. Now, on the issue of labels, I'm not so much taken in by labels, just like my senior Justice Ogola said. What is in a name is whether it is scientific, whether it is hybrid. But I was going to respond to the question, to the issue that when you look at the composition of the measures that were put in place, combining both the conventional methods and the scientific methods, you can best, if you are so much inclined to labels and catchphrases, you can call it a hybrid election, not so much scientific. So on the issue of inclusivity, I want to assure you we are working with UN Women. We are working with UN Women to see how the women of Uganda and the youth and all these other disadvantaged groups can be part of this process. But remember, during the LS1 elections, there was a lot of concern that the women of Uganda may not be so much inclined to participate because of the method of voting by lining up. But you saw the women coming up in big numbers and so on. So we are very confident that the women are not going to be disadvantaged. They are going to be part of this process. Only we want to appeal to the political parties. The rhetoric you send out, the message you send out to your supporters, is it promoting the process of ensuring that we carry on this process amidst this challenge, or are you creating a scenario of defiance, a scenario of people feeling they are not part of this process? I want to assure you the Electoral Commission is committed to ensure, as my Lord Justice Ogola said, elections are not for EC, they are there for the people of Uganda. And for as long as we are part of this beautiful country, I think it is within us, it is our duty, it is our obligation to ensure whatever we do at whatever levels will not only safeguard the lives and the people of Uganda, but also promote peace, stability, and tranquility that we have. I thank you. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Justice Simon Biabakama Mgenyi. And thank you to all the participants, and thank you to all the panelists, and thank you to our sponsors, our hosts, the Electoral Commission, UNDP, and the entire UN family for ensuring that this comes to pass. Like Mr. Mlekwa said, I think we would need to know when such an engagement would come through again, because there is a lot more that needs to be covered. Like you can see, it's only because of time that we need to be getting out of here, lest we stay the entire day. But also a special thank you to NBS Radio, formerly Next Radio, Capital FM, Radio West, Mega FM, Arua 1, NBS Television, and all the other media partners who have participated in this particular dialogue. We don't take it for granted. Let the discussion continue using the hashtag UGDecides2021. On air and right here at Protea Hotel, we want to say a very good afternoon to you, our viewers and listeners as well. We will meet again when such an engagement comes through once again. Thank you, Electoral Commission. God bless you. But as we go out, there is an informative video that will be coming through. Okay, I wanted to make sure we are off air.
Uganda's next general election is scheduled to take place in the first quarter of 2021, in line with the provisions of the 1995 Constitution. For example, according to the Presidential Elections Act of 2005, the election of the president shall, subject to the Article 61 of the Constitution, be held during the first 30 days of the last 90 days before the expiration of the term of the president. Uganda last held general elections in February 2016. Subsequently, the Electoral Commission on 11th December 2018 issued a roadmap to the 2020-2021 general elections. As Ugandans looked forward to another election and kept tabs on the election calendar, the World Health Organization on the 11th of March 2020 announced that the outbreak of the contagious coronavirus had reached pandemic level. This led to containment measures like lockdown in several countries, including Uganda, to implement the social distancing requirement and suppress the spread of the disease. According to the Ministry of Health, coronavirus or COVID-19 is spread mainly through close contact from person to person within about 6 feet. Respiratory droplets produced when an infected person coughs, sneezes or talks can land in the mouths or noses of people who are near or possibly be inhaled into the lungs. COVID-19 may be spread by people who are not showing symptoms.
Uganda has confirmed her first case of coronavirus disease, COVID-19.
In response, the Electoral Commission on June 16, 2020, issued a revised roadmap